Okay, so we are recording now. Welcome in to tentatively the Blurred Podcast. This is episode 1, so we will be occasionally yapping at least one time. Uh, if anybody
Hell yeah.
has suggestions for a different name, we're open to it. But for now, I've got my normal co hosts, Shiraj and Dexprozius, both of the Azura server. And today, they actually just did the first known two-man master trial clear of Unafraid of the Dark. It's pretty impressive. Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit?
Shadow Lord dead.
Hell yeah!
Shadowlord Big Dad.
How did it go? What did you guys?
Took like
What
5
jobs did
hours.
you do it on, and what was kind of the progression of that?
I was on Bard, and Shiraj was on Red Mage.
Okay.
Um,
Did you guys consider any other jobs for that?
I think you need a Bard for the sleeps, but
Okay.
considering that I didn't need Nitro, maybe we can reevaluate that
Hmm.
I
was
thought
able
about
to
adding a.
with just Cardinal. Go ahead.
I thought about doing warrior instead of red mage, but healing. We kind of need heals.
Would you have
Right.
had to bind everything?
Sorry.
Would you have had to bind everything if you went that
No, I
route?
mean bald plus warrior instead of. You get rid of the red mage. Yeah. But I feel like red mage plus bard is the better option.
Right.
I don't know how we would have lived without heals, because that got really
Yeah.
struggle bus towards the end.
What was the
Yes.
hardest part of the master trial for you guys?
Surviving.
Yeah. The amount of spam of 1k plus damage getting thrown in your face, and before we added Scarezo to the mix, you were taking like 2k every time. It was nuts.
Okay.
Yeah, we were not surviving without Skurzo.
That's awesome. You guys have anything else that you want to talk about? Chat, do you guys have any questions for these guys about their master trial? McDougal says he thinks an onion sword dancer would have been better than red mage. Probably. Has anybody gotten the onion sword? Either of you? Have you picked out your Mogmananza weapons yet?
I didn't get the onion sword. But
What'd you get?
I ended up getting the miracle chair.
Okay. How do you like it?
I think it's quite useful.
Yeah. Sharash, how do you like your Bonanza weapon?
I chose the wizard's rod.
Mm-hmm.
I like it a lot.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. I got the Diamond Aspis, and it's been a lot more useful than I expected. It's been really nice. Do you guys have anything else you want to discuss about the Master Trial, or do you want to just move straight into the topic today?
I mean, we messed around with our weapons and our buffs a lot to try and get down to the point. The first few attempts was just getting down the bird. The bird would constantly throw us over.
Okay, what was the bird doing?
Bird, it does a couple of moves that are really nasty, but continuously while you're fighting him, he removes a random piece of gear, and very often it's your weapon.
Oh, okay.
Other than that, he'll do I think it's like Dark Invocation, which before we added Scarezo to our defensive buffs, was doing like 2k.
Yeah,
And would sometimes one-shot you.
you guys were trying to skill chain, right? So I could imagine that getting your weapon stripped constantly could be really annoying.
We started skill chaining rather than spamming, more so just because of how much defense we had to employ into it, and you're not spamming as much as you want to. So
Okay.
those skill chains do like a full weapon skill's worth. You're getting more bang for your buck.
Right. Awesome. After the Yagado, was there any other struggle points?
The Shadow Lord himself sucked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
Shadow
looked
Lord was
like a
hard as fuck.
very, very busy fight when I saw you guys taking that on right at the end. I caught the end of it. I didn't catch the entire stream, but it looked very, very busy with the Doom spam, the AoEs that were going through shadows, all that stuff.
I wouldn't say the orc was chill, because the orc was kind of annoying, but he was mostly just super defensive.
Okay.
But the one time we wiped him, he did the Samurai SP into 2 Veil of Chaos back to back, which did over like 1200 each. So there was nothing you could do about that.
Oh, right.
That felt like RNG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think there was a definite RNG factor for the clear?
I wouldn't say a definite RNG factor because after we had that happen to us, we started binding him and running away when he did the Samurai SP,
Okay.
just to like try to spread out his TP moves and not get hit by a 30 Yalm AoE.
Yeah, it seemed like once you got past the Yagado and you were consistently doing that,
Smooth sailing to the Shadow Lord.
right. How many runs did it take you to figure out the Shadow Lord specifically?
3?
Oh,
I
that's
think
it?
3.
That's awesome.
Maybe 4. The
Yeah,
first
'cause
like 3 runs were Yagudo and Orc, and then we were on
Mhm.
Shadow Lord from that point on. Except for one, the second to last run, we went in and the Yagudo destroyed us, and we wiped within like 3 minutes and re-entered.
Okay. So overall, start to finish, a little less than about 6 hours from complete going into test stuff to completely clearing 2-man Unafraid of the Dark. That's pretty
Basically,
dope, guys.
It was about 5.5 hours. Yeah.
5.5 hours. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations. I hope they don't take anything away from you. There were 2 people that were leeching. I got to mention that. So, to be fair, it wasn't a straight 2-man, right? For the listeners, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just giving them a hard time. I gave them a hard time today. I was
that's
like,
what people are gonna say. It's like there's 4
yeah,
people.
yeah. There's 4 people in the party. Obviously, the 2 people that are AFK the whole time are carrying.
We made the point of having a Corsair outside of the party give me Tactrol for
Mhm.
Mordant Rhyme Aftermath,
Okay.
and then before entering, forced him to bust it so he didn't have the roll on us inside.
So what you're telling me is you got outside buffs before entering. I got you.
Just TP, which I can get from sleeping with an open necklace.
That's true. I
Bro,
think
the first time, the first time that we tried it, right? This guy spent about 10 minutes with sleeping potions and null mask.
I think you should do that for the next clear. No people leeching, so no cheating there. Make sure you're only using the open necklace. I don't want any room for criticizing. Okay.
Okay.
No room for outside criticism. I want a clean 2-man Unafraid of the Dark. So let's go ahead and run that back one more time
I
for
think
me.
my friends are my biggest critics, like you.
Oh yes, absolutely, and that's my goal is to be the biggest critic. Speaking of critics, we're going to get quite a bit of criticism for this, I think. Today, we are discussing the states of the current meta, quote unquote. So, what I mean by that is what jobs are perceived as being meta, um, the jobs that are most popular for the current contents, which would be Odyssey and Sortie. And we're going to be kind of framing where we rank each job in relation to that meta and how often it's used. So, what we're going to be talking about is really the pug kind of culture, what's popular, and what will actually like get people invited into groups, and what is kind of expected for the general population. This may not be exactly true for the more niche scenarios, the more experienced people, and even the like more middle tier content like Dynamis and stuff, which offers a lot more flexibility. We're going to be talking about if I wanted to join the top tier pug on this job, is it actually going to work or not?
So wait, we're not talking about niche stuff. What about Dancer with Onion Sword 3?
We'll talk about that later. For now, I want to talk about what do you guys think about the current state of the meta as far as it goes. Let's frame it in the relation to Azuran pugs. Like you see a lot of people shouting for R15 only. You see a lot of people shouting for R25 plus for segments and things like that. What are your general thoughts on that kind of stuff?
People are
Start.
dumb.
Oh, that's a fact.
Yeah.
That's the best opener I could have thought of.
Okay. What about it is dumb? Which part?
Like, I understand people want R25 plus for like safety, more leeway.
Right.
But all it does is isolate a good portion of the player base.
Okay. So what you're saying in general, especially on Asura, because all three of us are on Asura, for the pug culture and the meta culture, there's a lot of barriers preventing new players to being involved in this later end content. Is that fair?
That's super
Ye-
fair.
Yeah,
Brain
definitely.
themselves is trying to address it by making artifact and relic easier to make.
Yeah, that's pretty telling. I gotta say, I'm kind of surprised. We can kind of talk about that a little bit later on, but for now, what do you think? What would you do if you were like building a group? Do you think that it's fair to have kind of expectations like that, or do you think people should be involving other jobs, allowing more flexible setups? Do you think
I think
that
it's
the
fair to have
content allows for that?
expectations, but I think people need to temper them.
Okay.
I think it
Like
depends on the
when I make a
content.
shout, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I interrupted. You go.
When I make a shout for like a Sheol-C farm, I put the veteran tag in the shout, but I don't expect like someone who's at the level of people in my link shell or my static. I just want someone who's going to try and pull their own weight.
Okay.
Do you mean you don't like that master level 50 paladin who didn't use phalanx?
He clearly bought his character.
Well, at least he bought a meta job. That's all I'm gonna say.
Or the Corsair who didn't have a weapon skill set?
Oh boy. See, that's the other thing about the quote unquote like pug life is you can shout for these standards, and that's what it encourages new people to do is go out and buy characters like that and not learn how to play their jobs.
Yeah.
The problem with
Yeah.
the game right now is that it's so old and there's so many things to do that the game kind of eats itself in a way where people feel compelled to buy the thing that gets them into the end game as soon as possible, but they don't take the time to learn their job
Mhm.
or the nuances that are involved with it.
Right. Absolutely.
I agree.
So I think right now, in especially in relation to Odyssey, somewhat to Sortie as well, but mostly Odyssey, I think the most meta thing you can do on an individual basis is have a very versatile character, meaning multiple jobs. You can bring multiple things to a party, different styles of things like maybe a tank, DD, a support. You have multiple slots you can fill. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Cool.
That's
Being
important.
flexible. Yeah, being flexible is the best way.
Cool. So I think we've got kind of the intro, what we see as the meta, what we're going to be discussing today done. The first thing that I have right now is support jobs. So for support jobs, we have Corsair, Bard, Geo, and Red Mage. Those are the four that I put under this category. I want to talk about Corsair first. I think Corsair right now is arguably the most popular job in the game. I think it's the most universal job, and I also think it's one of the best starter jobs for new people.
I agree with all that.
So
What?
Shiraj doesn't have what?
Corsair unlock.
Oh, that's
I
fair.
do have
Shiraj.
Corsair unlocked.
Dex,
Corsair's level 1.
you're a career core. I think Corsair. Would you consider Corsair your main job?
Kind of.
Mhm.
Like, it's my main job for content.
Okay. And why is it the main job for content? Can you talk about a little bit like what it brings to the table?
Corsair brings everything. You can slot it into any party.
Okay.
It has powerful, unique buffs that you can't really replicate elsewhere. Like, there's no comparable store TP buff. There's no comparable magic buff.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, it's a really, really strong hybrid damage dealer. It's very strong at supporting the groups. It can do range damage. It can do up close melee damage. It can do magic damage. It's kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to being a hybrid damage dealer. So we'll add in a little bit of a little table when I'm editing this for the YouTube video. We're kind of ranking all the jobs, and we'll kind of put a visual in for that. But for now, I would say Corsair is probably the premier support hybrid DD. And
I think it's the best job in the game.
I
Most
agree.
Probably
overpowered
is
job in the
the
game.
Yeah. Speaking of other really, really good jobs, the other job that I have under supports right next to Corsair is Bard. So
I think Bard, in
yeah, go
my
ahead.
opinion, is definitely up there in potency and power.
Mhm.
It doesn't provide as much for more diverse party groups. Like it's the premier melee support job. And then for like mages, it provides support for those jobs, but not quite to the same extent that a Corsair would.
Okay.
And I would rank it based on its ease of access, right? Because Corsair you can pick up and go as a new player. A Bard requires quite an investment of time and effort.
That's very true. The standard for a Bard is going to be a lot higher for new players than it is for Corsair. There's a lot of Remo requirements, quote unquote, especially if you're doing like we talked about in the framing of Odyssey and Sortie. People are going to expect Remas. Luckily, if you were able to grab the Miracle Chair, that kind of boosts you a little bit ahead. But that's going to be kind of a limited basis thing.
I think in competitive endgame activities, players will still want a Bard that is worth their salt, has the Remas to provide those song effects, and having a Miracle Chair will get you in the door, but it won't carry you through the finish line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll give you a big boost starting out, and then from there you still have to do a lot of legwork with as far as getting like your car and your Marcius, all that stuff. Perfect. That's all I have for Bard. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about? I would say easily Bard is also an S tier, but probably slightly below Corsair, just because the difficulty of access and, like you said, it is a little bit more limited on those mage strats.
I would say Bard is definitely one of the best jobs in terms of like potency because look at Arya. Arya was kind of game changing for melee setups.
Right.
You know, the damage potential and increase was insane.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that I think really pushes Corsair ahead is that I can think of one fight that I don't bring a Corsair to, whereas I can think of several where I don't bring a Bard to. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Cool. So I think on in the overall ranking, I'd probably actually put Corsair as like double S and Bard as S. I think that would be fair.
Corsair's like triple S.
I don't think there's enough. We're definitely separating them by letter. Like if you want to put Corsair on this pedestal,
yeah, which I think it deserves. Yeah, I think it deserves it. So going on to some other supports, we got Geomancer next. Geomancer is a job that I just recently started playing, and I've been liking it a lot more than I expected. I think it's a phenomenal. What's that?
Didn't Furisk always have a Geo? Your ult?
Yeah, but I didn't really use it much because she was always on Bard.
So you more recently got more into nitty gritty and learning how it works.
Yes, gotcha. Exactly. So, recently I got the Prime Club. I've been taking it to Ammonon runs. I've been doing all sorts of fun stuff with it, and I've been enjoying it. Stage 4.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I might actually stage 5 the club. I like it a lot.
It's really cool.
Yeah. I think Geo is really... Geo to me is what Corsair is to physical, but Geo does it to magical and backline types. So I think Geo is really, really good at magic damage. It has a slightly lower level that it can perform some physical damage. Like I said, the Prime Club really exceeded my expectations. But outside of that, it's definitely a little bit more limited. There's going to be a lot of content that you can get away without bringing a Geo, where you can't really get away without bringing, say, a Bard or a Corsair.
Yeah. My take on the whole Geo thing is Geo itself, the job in isolation, doesn't do the hybrid damage that Corsair can do.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as a buffer, I think Geo is a much stronger buffer. And that applies to both physical and magical.
Yes.
The only problem is that Square Enix is like, this job's too powerful. Let's nerf it in content.
Yes.
And that's where the problem comes in, where like you wouldn't bring a Geo because Square Enix arbitrarily reduced its effectiveness in that piece of content.
Yes. I think Geo is exponentially good at creating situations where an entire alliance of 18 people can benefit from its debuffs, which is why they have to significantly bring it down nerf it. And then, of course, everything's percentage based on Geo, so it's just so significant with the debuffs that it gets. But when you can fit it in, it's amazing. Even in Sortie, where the basement is, what is it, minus 50% geomancy,
50. Yeah.
it's still worth bringing a geo in and getting that frailty and whatever other geo bubbles you decide to use up. It's the job is so strong that you can nerf it by 50% and you're still wanting to bring it. So to me, Geomancer easily A tier, slightly underneath Bard and Corsair. But I also think it's probably one of the easiest jobs that you can gear up from just a straight naked character level 99 and then apply it to endgame more quickly.
You don't need the Idris.
Mhm.
People will want it, but you don't need it.
Yeah, I was doing 8 boss runs, and even my first couple Amnon clears, I didn't have Idris. I think Idris is really nice, but again, going back to the pug situation, shouting for Idris requirements to me is kind of silly. Okay, next job that we have, which I think is actually in a very similar place as Geo, is going to be Red Mage. Red Mage, again, very, very versatile job. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to get into because of the gear requirements. Not as many Rimas as, say, Bard, but it has a lot of gear that it's needed to get to in order to perform all of the tasks that it can do. Red Mage can do a little bit of everything, so in order to make sure you're actually good at doing that little bit of everything, you have to get a ton of gear for it. What do you guys think about Red Mage?
Rush is more of a red mage than me.
I would say it's very overpowered in the right hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Red Mage is one of those like high skill floors where it's like you need to be. It's so easy to fuck up, you know,
Right.
Yeah.
and you will notice a veteran Red Mage versus a starter Red Mage, and with a starter Red Mage, the job kind of sucks. You know, once you have all of this good gear, all of the potency gear, you kind of bring out the best in it.
Right. So, as far as in the meta, where is Red Mage's place? How often is Red Mage going to be applied to, let's say, standard pickup groups?
Um,
I would say very often.
yeah,
So,
in the current content, quite often, yeah.
so let's
Red mage
let's
I'd say is the
take.
best complement to the other supports. So like if you're going a melee comp,
Mhm.
you can bring a bard, and then the red mage can act as like a pseudo DD while also further enhancing defensive abilities and lowering the accuracy or lowering the evasion and lowering your accuracy requirement for that piece of content.
Right. It's very complementary, especially in Sortie. I think it complements a lot of mage method, or sorry, melee method runs. Whereas Odyssey, you may or may not need a red mage for a lot of it. It seems like when you need a red mage in Odyssey, you really need it, and when you don't, they just kind of it can fit, but it's not always the optimal choice for your group.
I could see
Red
that.
mage excels at buffing the non like bard and core are your attack stats, and they buff those most often more than other things, whereas red mage buffs every other aspect of your play.
Cool. What do you think about red mage in relation to new players? Do you think it's
Very
a good
hard.
job to pick up?
No, not a good job to pick up at
Okay.
all.
I
And
wouldn't touch red mage with a 10-foot pole if you're a new player.
so what
Yeah,
is
Red Mage is
the
like
what is the
too
barrier here?
expensive.
It's too expensive. It's
Yeah,
just
it's too
strictly
expensive.
gear. Okay.
Because while there's other intricacies that makes a good Red Mage outside of gear, to make a good Red Mage usable, you need the good gear. You need the potent stuff. You know, nobody wants to take a, you know, half-assed like Distract 3 to, you know, Sortie. People doing kiting method for Sortie, they don't want half potency gravity. You know, it's
And
not
they
gonna
don't want
work.
that red mage to miss their debuffs, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's too important.
Right. So there's a lot of pressure being put on red mage,
Yeah.
especially in the current content. You have to have frazzle on Ammonon. If you don't, you're probably going to wipe. So a lot hinges on a red mage, so maybe not as new player friendly. So with that spirit, I personally, as much as I think red mage is easily an A+ tier job, just in relativity to the pub groups and by difficulty of gearing the job and getting to it for new players, I would probably say A-. What do you think?
I'd maybe even rate it lower
Mm-hmm.
in terms of its overall place, just because of its accessibility to players.
Okay.
I would honestly agree, because even though red mage is super overpowered, it's not very friendly to the general public.
Okay.
Like, the majority of red mages you see kind of suck. Like, it's not very new player friendly.
So what would you rate it in your opinion, Josh?
I would probably say B plus.
B+.
Mhm.
Okay. I think that's pretty fair.
I think all 4 of these jobs are a full letter grade apart from each other. It's arbitrary where on the scale you put them, but they're a full
Mhm.
letter grade apart.
Okay. Interesting. So for supports, you would rank them if we're going 1 through 4 here. You'd say Corsair is number 1, Bard number 2, Geo 3, Red Mage 4.
Yeah, and it's
Interesting.
mostly it's not so much their impact on content, because content is so dictative based on what the thing is. Like, the jobs are so flexible. This content needs this job, this content needs that job because of a specific buff or a specific debuff. But ranking them is more so about how the players can get access to those jobs.
Mhm.
It's like motorcycles flying by.
Yeah, no worries.
And how easy it is for those players to get into those jobs, because you're at endgame, any of these jobs is not going to do well if they don't have the premier amount of equipment to support it.
Okay. So we're going to take kind of a harsh turn. We're going from straight supports, we're going straight into kind of the black sheep now. We're going into the hybrid support DDs. And I'm ranking these by how often they're used in the meta. And I'm also ranking them on like how efficient they're used in the current content. So my highest ranked one out of the support DDs that I have listed here, and just for the list, we have Ninja, Puppet Master, Thief, Summoner, Beastmaster, Blue Mage, and Dancer. So my highest ranked hybrid support DD is Dancer right now because it fits so well into sortie. I think that it's kind of needed, but again, it's one of those jobs where it's kind of niche. I can apply it to sortie Abaddon runs, which is relatively high end, and I can apply it to V25 Zevioso. But outside of those two fights, I don't see a lot of use that Dancer is getting these days in the current like end game high end meta situation.
Arabati key item 1.
Oh yeah, it's true. There are a couple more. Aerobody, you could probably put it into Procne if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's definitely some places it can fit, but the two that really pop out to me are Zevi and Amanon. What do you guys think about where Dancer's at right now?
I would say B or A. You know, it depends. I think it's a decent job for people to pick up, you know.
So I've
It
ranked
just
it in B. I think it's an excellent job. I think it's really, really versatile. I just don't think it gets a lot of playtime in relation to meta jobs. And I think Dancer is probably one of the harder jobs to pick up in this category. Dex, you have
Unlike
any
most,
thoughts?
unlike most damage dealers,
Mhm.
which it's a support damage dealer, so it has a bigger toolkit and more flexibility. Obviously,
Hmm.
it's probably the harder one among them, if not the hardest, because
Yeah.
all of its actions are low cooldown job abilities, and most of the other jobs kind of like melee and then do their own thing when they want to.
Yeah. I
It's
think
more APM.
I think Dancer and Rune Fencer are probably the two busiest jobs just by sheer amount of buttons that you have to push. But that
And you
being
should only
said,
do things.
right, right. That being said, you Dancer can offer a lot to a group. It can be anything from the main DD. It can tank in certain scenarios. It can be a healer. There's a lot going for it. It's just finding that area where it really shines can be kind of difficult. So I put Dancer in B.
I think B is fair.
Mhm.
I think pre-Amanon and Dancer kind of exploding into the sortie scene and becoming much more accepted in the metagame, you wouldn't have rated it nearly that high. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't on people's radar.
yeah, absolutely. The only time we used Dancer before that was for the piercing Odyssey fights.
I'd
And
say in like 2020, 2021,
mhm,
Dancer was like in the bottom 3 jobs in people's minds.
I agree.
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
Sortie has brought it out a lot, and I really like that it is being used more. I like that people are playing with it more, and I'm just seeing it more in general. It can be
Yeah,
applied really, really well to like Dynamis, Omen, all that stuff. But Sortie really brought it to the forefront. You guys have anything else for Dancer?
I think it's in a good spot at B.
Yeah.
I think it's like telling that Dancer is so good in the current environment of
Mhm.
Final Fantasy Endgame. It's so telling that people need to be open-minded about the jobs and where they can easily jump tier lists if a piece of content allows their unique flavor to shine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I really like that Dancer is being used more often. It's always been a job that I've been interested in. And I'm glad that there's a little bit of another dimension that it's being able to be played with right now with it having a slashing option if you chose to do the Onion Sword. Even though that's a whole other discussion for another time, I do think it is cool.
I do like that it gives that job more flexibility.
Yeah,
Every job
absolutely.
really deserves the opportunity to be like a warrior and be able to contribute all the
Yeah.
time.
Speaking of jobs that I wish could contribute all the time, next I have a Blue Mage. And Blue Mage is a job that I've always wanted to play that I never have. It seems really, really interesting to me. I love the idea of it. I know some really great Blue Mages. Dex, your infamous Blue Mage. Side note, real quick. When we were doing V15s, when they were the most current contents, my group did not have a Dark Knight, and Dexprozius main DD'd, tanked, and TP drained and bows V15 when none of the sortie gear was out. We didn't have any ranked nav. It was honestly the most impressive gameplay I've ever seen. And Blue Mage can do some fucking amazing things. What do you think about it, Dex?
Shame you didn't record it because the screech I did at the end when we won.
Okay, well, I'm glad I didn't because the time before that we died at 1%, and that
I
screech
thought
was
we
even
won.
worse.
Two
Yeah,
of us
you were
weapons
cheering.
up and that guy.
Yeah. But what do you think about where Blue Mage is at in relation to the meta and to new players right now?
Blue Mage has really fallen off. It
Why is that?
it was much more premier endgame job in late 2010s and
Hmm.
2020s. It's not been useful in a lot of
I mean,
things.
Blue Mage
Blue
was
Mage,
meta around 2016. You know,
yeah,
you'd have like Almir CDC spams, but then the agility nerf, nerfing the evasion of enemies, kind of balanced other jobs, and then Blue Mage kind of fell back a little bit
Mm.
because Blue
Blue
Mage at
Mage
the
is in
time
a
was
weird
one of
spot
the
now.
yeah. It's like Blue Mage can work for content, but it's not the top pick anymore because
Yeah.
other
No,
jobs can do stuff.
So
in
it's kind
almost
of.
every scenario,
Mhm.
you're kind of better off taking a heavy DD rather than Blue. Yes, Blue provides those support aspects,
Mhm.
but people just often will just rather kill the thing faster and not have to worry about having to have back pocket options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Like Blue Mage can work.
where
Sorry.
would you be applying Blue Mage right now in current contents? What's
Outside of
best case?
Kalunga, it's kind of like
Mhm.
a fun option. Like, where do you want to have fun?
Blue Mage
Right.
is more the like, I'm not into the end game. I want to solo stuff or low man stuff.
Okay. I do
Like,
think that it's fair to put an asterisk on that because there are some fights, like it is nice for Kalunga, but there's also some utility that you need out of it in the current content. So, say Bumba and
It's the
bows.
tank for Bumba,
Yeah,
surprisingly.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tank for Bumba. It is a TP drainer for bows. It can be effectively used if you're using a multiple key item ongo strategy. Uh, Anything else that pops into your mind about where Blue
Blue Mage,
Mage?
Blue Mage is the jack of all trades, master of only cleaving.
Mhm,
Sounds
that's
about right.
fair. So where would you rank Blue Mage currently?
I think
Probably C.
C is a fair spot for it.
That's where I had
Maybe
it as
lower,
well.
but it does need an asterisk.
Yeah, I think a Blue Mage is needed often enough that it is definitely worth having. It's probably not going to be what I would recommend for somebody's first pick as a job. How
Quite
how difficult
complicated.
it is for new how difficult is it for new players to get into Blue Mage?
I
I
would
don't
say
think
that,
Blue Mage needs a lot weapon wise.
like, ideally you have Tizona though, because of how expensive the magic is.
Yes, Tizona, like people love to talk about Nagling, but Tizona goes par to par with Nagling while also providing like all the utility the job could ever want.
Okay. So you would say it's relatively difficult because there they would be expected in a lot of the current contents probably to have a Tizona,
Yes.
even
Well,
though it
I don't think
may
that's
not be
so difficult
necessary.
per se. Like
Okay.
getting one Rima for your job isn't difficult per se,
Hmm.
but it is totally expected. If you play Blue Mage, you would have that Rima.
Okay.
My slight against Blue Mage is more. It's very similar to Red Mage in that it can be Jack of all trades esque, not quite to the same degree as Red Mage, where Red Mage can kind of enfeeble a monster so heavily that the Red Mage can handle it by itself. But Blue
Mm,
Mage can provide debuffs, buffs, heals for all different kinds of content to a degree, and in that regard, you want to have gear for all of those aspects. So
yeah.
just like Red Mage is a wardrobe killer, Blue Mage can also be a wardrobe killer.
Hmm. In
If
a
you
lot
play
of
it
ways, I think
melee,
Blue Mage and Dancer are very, very similar. Is if you count like what they can offer a group, they're very dynamic. They're very diverse. The difference between the two, I think, is that Blue Mage is not in a position where it is actively being used in the most meta content to date, which is Sortie 9 boss.
yeah,
I
Cool.
think it could work in 49 boss, honestly.
I've
I think it
posted
could
on the
too.
forum many times where I thought Blue Mage could be the tank for that
Yeah.
content.
And
I still think it could be the tank for. Yeah.
and I think this is a good time to note, like, we're not saying that any of these jobs are bad. We're strictly referring to like what a pug that really wants the meta jobs would expect. I think Blue Mage would be awesome
Blue
for
Mage is my favorite
sorting.
job.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic job. Just strictly speaking, if you're trying to do the latest content, it's probably not going to be as used as much as you would like.
It lacks in certain aspects. I
Yes.
think one of the worst things against Blue right now is how weak their spells are
Mm,
in terms of like you can't enhance the potency of your buffs. You can't make your physical spells do damage like you used to, and you can't enfeeble nearly as well as a red mage can. None of your even like high end nukes or high end debuff spells
mhm.
enfeeble the same way a red mage will.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can all agree Blue Mage probably C tier. I think it's a
Mhm.
great job, just not applied as much as we would like. So moving on to the next one, here's a job that I really, really wish would get a rework, and I think has a lot of potential. Summoner. Summoner probably is not used very often. I can only think of a handful of fights, especially when we're talking Odyssey Sortie, pretty much exclusively. There's only a couple things that Summoner's going to be doing, and most of it is TP draining.
Sadly,
Mhm. So, what do you guys think about where Summoner's at? And as for new players, would you recommend it as a job for new players?
No.
no, not to that question, not at all.
Okay. Is there a
Not
reason? Is it
there.
because like gear, or is it because where it's at in the
It's
game?
both.
What do you think?
It's both.
Definitely both.
Okay.
Summoner is one of the unique jobs in the game where almost all of its gear is exclusively for Summoner.
Right. So it's relatively hard to gear just because it doesn't share a lot of stuff with other jobs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you are expected to have certain like staffs for like your
Mhm.
summons. So a lot of people would require a Prime or Nirvana, a well decked out Griot, it just depends. And they would
Right.
also expect you to have a pretty decent summoning skill set for your buffs, which is not cheap, by the way. A new player who's trying to get into the job definitely cannot afford that.
You
Right.
need the S3 set +1.
Or
Yeah.
you need a lot of master levels.
Yep, that too.
Right. How often is Summoner being used in current content?
It's
Could you
used for
repeat
a
that?
string of V25s, but more as like a utility job and slightly for its buffs, but not nearly for like its whole toolkit. Doesn't do
Yeah.
damage. It's not like the game it was 8 years ago where you could just bring tons of summoners and Zerg the premier endgame content. It just
Mhm.
doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and it's definitely not as effective either. Summoners can still be used in like the older content. I still see people doing summoner burns on helms and things like that. Um, for a lot of players, it's harder to do that than it is to just melee burn these days.
For sure.
So, unfortunately, the place where summoner is being plugged into is so limited that it's almost exclusively used for TP drain battery.
That's a consequence of gear power creep. You give so much gear to all these melees, and they can now do twice as much damage as a summoner, twice as fast.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about any risks. There's
So that's one thing about Summoner is it has a hard limiting factor, which is the blood pact resets. It's like 21 seconds, I think it is.
Yeah,
it's also the fact
2021.
that they still haven't reverted the blood pack nerf.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So
blood pack wall really hurts the job.
yeah. So really, it's going to not be able to keep up with melee damage dealers because you've got the walls, you've got the time limits. It's unfortunately it is needed for certain fights, but it's really not in a super great spot. But when it is needed, it is needed for sure because you need it for our body, V, or yeah, the first key item needed for Ongo or not Ongo, sorry. Um, what am I thinking of? Bows for the TP drain if you're doing two key items. A couple other places. Any other places you guys can think of where Summoner is really needed?
Sealed Fate.
Seal Fit,
Yeah,
okay.
you bring 2 summoners for that, but that's still just TP draining.
Yeah. So, based off of what we were saying for that, what do you think Summoner would be rated as?
Probably a D.
Okay.
As in, it's not a total F. It's not like
Yeah.
non-existent, but it barely squeaks by in terms
Yeah.
of the meta. And I want to
I'll probably
say
say
that like people have experimented with using summoner in 8-boss sortie runs to success. It's
Mhm.
it's something that can be utilized, but it's definitely not the premier thing to do. It's you have to go through so many hurdles to make it function.
Yeah, you've got to go out of your way, which, let's be real, a poker's not going to do that.
Right.
No.
So I think Summoner is in the D tier strictly because it is needed sometimes. Is it going to be used all the time? No. But everybody that is doing an Odyssey climb at some point is going to want a Summoner in their group. And oftentimes it's a really hard job to find.
It is. Like, for, like, Odyssey, for example, you don't need the, like, premier, like, sets, right?
Mhm.
You just need a sub 30-second blood pack timer.
Mhm.
But depending on the group, some groups expect you to do damage at the same time, not just Mew only. So
Right.
it really depends on what kind of group you've got.
Yeah, people
Cool.
want you to
Yeah.
like Mew, Apogee, Nuke, Mew, just constantly resummoning and casting.
Right. I think
You really
Summoner
have to work.
could have a lot of potential. I would love to see Summoner get a slight rework. I would love to see Summoner be a valid replacement for, say, Geo, Red Mage, or Bard. Give it some buffing attributes.
Work
Make
more.
its blood packs a little bit more meaningful. I think that would be really nice. I would love to see Summoner get a revamp, but as it stands right now, I think D tier is pretty fair.
I think
Honestly,
it's
hot
among the
take,
top 3 jobs that need a rework.
Mhm.
hot take incoming.
Yeah.
I don't think Summoner needs that much change outside of the Blood Pack nerf
Okay.
reverted.
Okay.
I just think it needs the buffs increased. Because
Yeah.
as of right now, it's like, why bring a Summoner for buffs if Corsair exists?
Exactly.
Yep.
I want Summoner to be able to cap haste the same way a Bard or a Geo can. If it could do that, or even if it could just provide a little bit more meaningful TP bonus or the things that it already has, just upgrade those a bit, and I think it could be in a really, really good place.
People who started recently won't really be aware, but a couple years back, the guy who uploaded on YouTube, Romoko, he would
Mhm.
always make guides for jobs, and he had a little series where he kind of made a wish list for a rework of a job, and his summoner one was really on the money in my opinion, where he made all the summons actually summonable, like Odin was summonable instead of tied to the 2 hour,
Okay.
and he had it so that Odin would give a store TP, whatever it's called, favor.
Hmm.
So it kind of would be like not as good as core, but alongside it in a different role,
Right.
just so that it could compete with it.
Yeah, I think that's a
Summoners
very
something.
valid place. I think Summoner should be a valid hybrid support DD the way that the other jobs in the other categories were, like Geo and Red Mage, Corsair, etc. I think that would be a good place for it.
I would love to see it be competitive as a buffer, and then
Hmm.
an off magic DD. You know,
Right. Cool. So
but
the
now it's
next job I have after Summoner, and I think a lot of this things that we've been talking about are just going to be echoed right now. Beastmaster. So Shiraj, Dex, you guys both played Beastmaster. What are your thoughts on where the job is right now? What are its uses? How is it for new players? What do you think?
The job makes me cry.
Oh no. Why? Why Shiraj?
Well, you see, I have a Primax,
Mhm.
and I don't get to use it because the job does not fit in the meta.
All right. I just want to say real quick, side note, you are lock styling it right now. So
Yes.
you can't tell me that you don't use it. But right, Beastmaster,
The,
not in a great spot.
the only place you really use Beastmaster is TP Drain,
Mhm.
similar to Summoner, and it sucks. It sucks. It's limited
Yeah,
to 30 seconds, and the pet damage is terrible. Like,
right,
you might be able to get a 50k magic burst.
right.
It has great debuffs, but the debuffs themselves are not good enough to replace the other buffers and debuffers such as Geomancer.
Okay.
The only time a Geomancer can be replaced by a Beastmaster is if Geo is nerfed by 75%.
Mm.
Yep.
So I think I've heard Beastmaster compared to Geomancer before, and I think it's actually a really interesting comparison. I think Beastmaster, in a lot of ways, is very similar because it has a lot of debuffs it can do, has a lot of utility that it can provide to the party. Killer Instinct is
Don't sleep on that.
probably one of the most potent buffs in the game. It's
Absolutely.
just the times when you get to actually apply that to relevant content is so low that it kind of hurts. All three of us play Beastmaster. I wish I could play Beastmaster more often, but unfortunately, I think it's in kind of a poor spot right now.
I play Beastmaster in that I play it to the meta's utility of it. I don't play it as someone who understands the job and all of its nuances. Like Shiraj is much better at the job in that he plays it more to its strengths rather than just oozing and TP draining.
Right. Anything else to add for Beast? Where would you guys rank it?
Maybe the same tier as Summoner, but below it. Like it
Mm,
doesn't provide the same degree of utility in buffs,
okay.
and it doesn't often get the chance to provide DPS like Summoner can in certain fights.
Mm. I put Summoner on the same, or sorry, Beastmaster on the same rank. I put it in D as well. I think it can be used just about as often in Odyssey as Summoner is for, like you said, TP Train. I think it can be used for weird things like Killer Instinct here and there. It has a lot of potential. I think it could use a couple of reworks. It'd be really nice if we could get a couple pets with some more potent debuffs, some more potent buffs that apply to the party. I like
Yeah,
Beastmaster a
that's
lot.
really the big.
What do you think about Beastmaster for new players? Hard to get into? Would you recommend it as someone that's trying to get into the end game?
I
I
don't think
wouldn't
it's hard.
recommend Beast. Yeah, it's not hard at all to get into, but I would not recommend Beast to anybody, even the veteran players.
Yeah.
Like, I would actually rank Beastmaster higher than Summoner,
Hmm.
probably on like the same like ranking of like D, E, maybe whatever. But I would say Beastmaster has more uses because look at what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
We're RP farming,
Yeah.
you know.
Beastmaster is the universal cheese method. Kale pointed that out in our chat. It is the universal Bumba RP way to get RP without actually putting any effort in. And we're doing
Yeah.
that right now while we're recording this podcast. Something you can do
I'd
that's
say
easily
outside
brain
of like
dead.
its meta uses, because it's meta uses we're talking about
Yeah.
end game content, bosses, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Outside of that, Beast
Like-
definitely excels better than Summoner at providing DPS. Like you can bring a Beast to content where it's less consequential and
Mhm.
provide DD level damage with axes. But
Yeah.
in terms of like its function in parties for actual endgame content with bosses, it doesn't quite slot properly and
Okay.
provides less. I know it's
Yeah.
like half and half of an answer, but it's just in a weird spot where if, as you were saying, some of the pets got buffed or given more utility, I think Beast could excel heavily.
I always have the question of, like, as much as I want to use Beastmaster in a party, why would I use it if there are so many other jobs that do the same thing but better?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the
It's just a
unfortunate
passion
part.
thing.
Yeah, because I've talked about bringing Beastmaster into an 8 boss sortie run, and you can't. It can work. You can force it in there, but that's the thing is you're forcing it in there, which with
Yeah.
other jobs you don't have to do. So I think I'm gonna put Beastmaster on D because I think the next 3 jobs that we're going to talk about are clearly worse. Unfortunately, they're and again, this is not to say that the jobs are bad themselves. It's just as it relates to the meta and how often they're being used in the most current content. They're not in good places. So the first job that I
Sit
have
on the fence.
is
I'm gonna say these jobs are bad.
okay. That's fair. Ninja is the first job. What do you guys think about where Ninja is at right now? What do you think? How often is it used? What do you think about new players getting into it?
Ninja is used for one fight in the game in terms of meta, and that's Crystal Paradise Master Trial. So most players will never use Ninja.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate because I have Ninja. I I fell in love with Ninja because it was super fun to play, and you could do stupid things with it using hybrids. It's just a fun job to play. It has a lot of cool utility if you're solo or doing like low man or easier content. The problem is, as soon as you get into the more current content like Sortie and Odyssey, it falls off quickly. It's not doing a lot of damage. It can't tank anymore with shadows. What do you think about where Ninja's at, Shiraj?
I think you've pretty much nailed it. Like, Ninja is really good at just existing, honestly. Like, the katana weapon skills suck. So if you want to fill in the spot for a DPS, most of the time you're going to use a Naegling anyway.
Right.
Who wants to use Savage Blade on a ninja?
Yeah, Real Moko once said that it's pretty pathetic when you see career ninjas using Savage Blade, and I gotta say, I really agree with that sentiment. It's
Yeah.
kind of sad.
This is after they buffed them.
Mhm.
And hybrids, even though hybrid weapon skills are super good and they're so strong, they're not new player friendly. You need a
Yeah.
lot of gear to make those work and a lot of buffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
If the buffs are off, then your hybrids go from doing damage cap to doing 20k, and you're not nearly providing anything to the party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you do to put Ninja into a position where it could be used more? Just out of curiosity.
As a rework,
Yeah, what kind of changes
think
would you
it-
make?
I think it needs a unique job ability that gives something to the party. Because right now, just doing damage is not enough. So many jobs can do damage, but what do you bring to the party that's unique and useful, in my opinion?
Everyone clamors over the Yagyu Darkblade because it's so universally changing of the job by giving the party shadows, and I think that's the worst thing they could have done for the job. Square Enix has to constantly balance the content around the old school brain idea of ninja tank because no damage. So they're like, well, that's not balanced. Let's make it so that everything AoEs and ninja can't keep shadows and they get one shot.
Yeah.
I think the best rework that the game can provide for ninja, if they're willing to have the balls to do it, is to completely revamp and enhance Inin and Yoni to make ninja stance on one or the other.
Yeah.
Make the tank stance, give it like significant defensive stats so that it can kind of take a hit and then cycle its shadows to absorb or make it much more evasive, generate better enmity, and make the opposite end allow it to provide buffs for the party, like make all of its enhancing ninjutsu AoE, so you can give store TP to the party, you can give subtle blow to the party.
Yeah.
Those things would be great steps in the right direction.
Yeah, right now it feels very much like it's a lukewarm hybrid DD that doesn't really shine in any particular area outside of hybrids. And
Jobs that say I do damage and I don't help the rest of the party tend not to work well in the party.
Right. Cool. I think that about covers ninja. What were you gonna say, Shiraj? You got anything to add?
I was gonna say, why do the stances decay over time? That's one of the worst outdated things ever.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I didn't even know they did that, so I just learned something new.
Yeah, you have a tank stance and it decays over time.
I didn't know
that's terrible.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. Okay, so I put ninja in the F tier. But as a little asterisk, I do want to add that if you are doing ongo multiple key item strategies, you do probably want a ninja. So that's probably the only case scenario where in the meta I'm really applying a ninja outside of Crystal Paradise.
It's strange that ninja is like, if you go down the list of jobs that can nuke, it's like, oh that one, and then you all the way to the bottom. It's like, oh, ninja has nukes.
Yeah, and its nukes can be really strong, just not strong enough to mean anything, unfortunately. So I love ninja. I think it has a ton of capability solo. I think it has a lot of cool, unique things that it can abuse in mid-tier content. But as it relates to the current meta, I'd say F tier is pretty fair.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I like the job there.
So now that we all agree that ninja is a great job, let's move on to everyone's least favorite job, Puppet Master. So I'm going to preface this by saying I don't know anything about Pup. Okay. So I know one thing about Pup. I know everything. Everybody hates Pup. That's what I know. So, Dex, Shiraj, what are your guys' thoughts about Pup?
The job sucks.
Job sucks. Okay. Dex, what do you think about Pup? Oh, go ahead, Shiraj.
No, let Dex.
Pup's too complicated as a pet job, and people already are biased against blunt-only jobs.
So that is
egg that no one wants to touch.
Yeah, that's a really good point about it being blunt only. Theoretically, the puppet should be able to do different types of damage, right? But it seems like it kind of fails at that. Is there any utility that you guys see pups having? Like, if you could find good things to say about Pup, what would you say?
Pup is the strongest pet?
Yeah.
In what way?
Tankiness. Okay. Self-sufficient. I think the best use case of Pup in today's endgame would be V25 and Guy.
I have seen some people use that as a way to control ads, as a way to have a form of blunt damage. It seems like a really creative use of the job, but in the overall meta, probably not something that you would normally see. It's kind of like putting a Beastmaster into Kalunga. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, very similar.
Okay. So overall, I have Pup in the F category, unfortunately, just because outside of Ngai, like you said, I literally cannot think of anywhere to put Pup. What do you... Oh yeah. Is there
I've
anything
seen
else you guys
it,
can think of? And also, what do you think about it for new players?
I've seen it used in 3 key item strategy Ongo, where you kill the
mhm.
bird and then you use the pup to tank it, since
Yeah.
you need to tank all 3.
Very true.
The
Pup is just a
Masters.
beast with no utility.
Yeah, that's actually a great explanation. The job is good for new players, but just not for actual content. It's good for soloing stuff.
Pup is like the premier way to solo V0s. Pup is the premier way to solo a bunch of ambuscades. Pup is a
But that's
super strong job with little investment as a
Yeah.
solo player.
But it's not good for group content in the slightest.
So
It needs a lot of things added or adjusted in order for it to function in similar roles. I'd love to see Pup's Black Mage frame be able to go to Ongo, and that would be a cool thing.
mhm.
It's not there right now.
So, side tangent real quick. When I first came back to the game in 2019, I was on the Sylph server where I started back in, I don't know, 2006,
Backwaters.
2007.
Got it.
Yeah. And one of my old friends who I knew from 75 era days was a multi-boxing maniac who carried me an Omen with 15 pups and 3 Corsairs. And I'm not kidding. He literally just threw 15
Like
puppets at stuff. And it felt like a fever dream at the time. I was like, what the fuck is going on? It was really fun. It was really cool just watching pups overdrive and demolish stuff. But currently, unfortunately, I don't think it offers much. Is there anything you guys would change about the job to make it more relevant?
I think you should have more control of your automaton.
Yes.
Like, if you're trying to tank something on Puppet Master, I'm pretty sure you're limited to a 30-second cooldown that you can't really control. You just have to like prepare for the timer.
Mhm.
You do the maneuver and it unlocks the pup to be able to do actions, whereas you should be able to dictate the pup doing an action instantaneously.
And the maneuvers just enhance it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Like,
Okay. I think Puppet could use a lot of reworks. And to be honest, I think we could probably do an entire episode of like actually really diving into the reworks. For now,
I
we're
know
just kind
people
of
that love that job, and they
Mhm.
could offer much greater insight as to why it's not functioning in the end game.
I think at some point maybe we'll bring some of those people on and have that discussion. For now,
But
uh,
even they would agree with
yeah,
putting it near the bottom.
yeah.
the only
Next,
solution for
yeah.
Puppet Masters is
Mhm.
go sub Black Mage and go warp out, go to a knockout and change to a different job.
That's fucked up.
Sorry.
Jesus. All right. Next job on the
Hard-hitting.
list. We have this is our last hybrid support job. It is Thief. What do we think about Thief, boys? Who wants to go first?
Let Shiraj go. I keep yapping.
What's that job again?
Uh, so from what I remember, this job excels at applying treasure hunting.
See, and that's all it's good for.
Unfortunately,
Unfortunate, because it has all these enmity tools that just don't be used anymore.
yeah.
Yeah, I really wish those enmity tools were like great. Like being able to like control and manipulate the enmity was such a unique thing that you just can't really make use of anymore. I wish you could.
Yeah. So Thief is interesting to me because I see a lot of new players that are really gravitated towards this job. I see a lot of people that are posting, hey, I just started this game. My main job is Thief. And it kind of breaks my heart because at some point they're going to have that discussion if they want to get into the end game that they're not going to really be able to bring that Thief. So Thief can be used occasionally in the end game. I think Tao in our chats pointed out that our first Bumba V20 clear had a Thief in it, and it does have like some very very niche utility with larceny.
Yes.
And it can be good because it can equip a Nagling and it can steal a monster's
And it can
SP
Savage
ability.
Blade.
Yeah, it can Savage Blade and it can steal a monster's SP ability. But outside of those two things, and I gotta say that even though it can do that, it can be replaced with a lot of different jobs as well.
Yes.
I mean, About the Boomba thing, I actually think Beastmaster is better than Thief for Boomba.
Mhm.
Even though you
V20?
can yeah, even for V20. Because even though you can larceny the SP, you don't get the defense down, you don't get the HP down,
Yeah.
and you don't get the 60 seconds of TP drain, delaying the inevitable doom of denounce.
Yeah.
So you make that 2 minutes 30 into 3 minutes 30 instead. Thief just removes an SP that has a chance to fail if it's Yegasumi.
Right. So, if you were to change Thief, how would you make it more relevant? Just a couple ways.
It should excel harder at the enmity control. It should be able to transfer
Mhm.
enmity much easier with lower cooldowns.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I think it needs more than that because right now, to me, Thief feels like a failed dancer. It feels like dancer without the utility. And the problem that even if we start including the enmity mechanics, we need more fights where that will actually matter. A lot of the
Yeah.
content these days, we don't need a tank. Or even if we do, the tank is not going to need control to that kind of enmity.
Outside of the enmity, Thief's
Mhm.
contributions to the party are faint, which lowers evasion by a very small amount,
Mhm.
and um, it's not accomplice. Is it? It's the one that gives the whole party accuracy and subtle blow.
I think that's Conspirator. I think we talked about that last
Here,
time, but I'm not 100% sure.
that sounds correct.
Okay.
Outside of that, it doesn't really help the party at all.
Yeah.
So maybe like Dancer has climactic flourish to make itself crit really hard.
Mhm.
Thief could stab the enemy and put a debuff on it for 3 minutes that makes the enemy reduce critical hit evasion or take
Mhm.
heavier crit damage.
Yeah.
Multipliers.
Yeah. I think
Things like that.
Thief could do a heavy rework. Somebody in the chat said break damage cap with sneak attack. That would be really interesting. I think
I
there's
think so.
I think there's a couple jobs that could really benefit from being able to break damage cap as like a unique
I have
job
one in mind
trait.
that I talk about a lot.
Yeah, but the problem is I don't know about you guys. Do you guys ever see them actually coding it in that you can break the damage cap?
No.
No,
I don't know
Too
unfortunately.
either.
much too much
They'd
effort.
have to like make enemies a lot stronger and just reduce everyone's overall numbers.
Right. Okay. So unfortunately, for me, Thief goes in the F tier.
I think Thief is the worst job in the game, unfortunately.
Um, maybe. I think it can be. I think it can be used a handful of times.
I think the
But
3 jobs we just spoke of are the worst 3. I just rank Thief the
yeah,
worst of them.
yeah,
I think in meta play, like in the current endgame content, yeah, definitely.
yeah. I agree.
I think Thief is really good for soloing,
Oh yeah,
farming stuff.
it's
Mhm.
one of
But
the best
in
solo jobs.
in endgame, just there's no place for it.
Yeah. Would you recommend Thief to new players? Because we did say it's good for soloing and making money, especially in things like Omen. It's nice to go in and cleave, get a bunch
I
of
think
Schwartz
Thief
and stuff like
isn't a
that.
bad first job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good first job. It's just you can't be expected to get invited to endgame.
Hmm.
You
So
have to like
yeah,
play
go
the
ahead.
job with the caveat knowing that you're not going to carry it across the finish line. Like you're going to use it
Mm,
to make another job.
yep, that is exactly what I was going to say. Actually, perfect. Cool. So for me, Thief goes into the F tier. Again, according to how often it's going to be invited to pub groups, how often it's going to be used in meta compositions. Moving on, uh, our next category is just normal damage dealers, heavy DDs. So first job I have on this list is a job that I don't play as much as I would like. I have one on one of my characters, and I think it's really, really amazing. But it is also lacking in a few areas, and that is Samurai. What do you guys think about where Samurai's at?
Dex, you want to start?
Sure. I think Samurai in recent years has fallen off
Hmm.
in terms of the hierarchy of the heavy DDs.
Yeah.
It used to be like the best damage dealer among the group,
Hmm.
and I think it just doesn't provide the same degree of utility and damage options that it used to. Like it doesn't really have a good blunt option.
Yeah.
So it kind of trails behind warrior in party utility, and its SPs are kind of like niche.
Right. I think Sam still can be the best damage dealer, provided it is put into the right situation. I think it needs a little bit more buffs than compared to some of the other DDs that we have. Uh,
That's true.
but if you get a Geomancer and a Sam together, if you boost Samurai's attack enough, I think it can really, really shine. I still think it is probably one of the premier DDs. It just needs a little bit more love to get there.
I'd say a more like thought out assessment is that Samurai is the
Mhm.
premier skill trainer in the game,
Okay.
and as content has continued to come out, more and more often we are punished for skill training, which is why the meta of spam the same skill chain property weapon skill savagely has
Yeah.
become so popular. Because you don't want a skill chain, you get punished for skill training. So
Okay.
Samurai, whose kit is built around skill training, suffers, albeit not a lot, but
Right.
it does suffer for it.
I think Samurai is the best solo DPS. Like if you're
Yeah,
like the only DPS in a group, I think Samurai is the best by far. But outside of that, it falls short quite a lot.
To your
Okay.
point with like Para, Geo, and a Samurai, it's a match made in heaven. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason why every RMT that sells master levels is a Samurai with a Geo.
Mhm. That being said, I think Sam is really flexible. I think that it has good piercing options. It's obviously got really strong hybrid weapon skills with Jinpu and Kagero. It's got a lot going for it. It just the like you said, the unique thing about Samurai is the skill chains. And if you take away the fact that it can't skill chain, it's gonna struggle. I think Mume and the Prime Great Katana have really fixed some of that problem, but again, it still suffers from the problem of I need to have that attack capped if I'm going to really perform
Yes.
well.
And also, like, you'd never want to hear the words like your job isn't good enough until you have Prime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. See, I think when I was originally doing this ranking, I put Sam on S tier because my experience with it is almost exclusively with a Prime Great Katana Samurai. But now that you guys are talking about it a little bit more, I think we can probably
I'd
put
put
it
it
out
A.
like A. Yeah. The other thing I want to just mention real quick, in my opinion, Impulse Drive Samurai is super underrated. Super underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it performs incredibly well. I go into sortie every day with my Sam, and I'm just spamming 99k impulse drives. I would almost rather bring an impulse drive Sam than a Masamune in situations where you're not skill chaining. But I don't know what you guys think
Well,
about that.
especially in situations where you get to utilize your SPs, you just
Mhm.
crank massive damage cap in most situations.
Yeah.
I think Jaegersumi is actually one of the best SPs in
Mhm.
terms of
In the game.
damage dealers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if you're utilizing SP2, then Samurai deserves one of the top spots. But if your crutch is the SP2, it's kind of shit.
That's a perfect assessment that encapsulates my thought.
Cool. Anything
A little too
else?
reliant on that.
Right. Anything else to add to Samurai?
No, it's kind of like it's very similar to the other DDs in its class,
Mhm.
which we're going to talk about shortly.
Yeah, it's a
I
great
think
job.
It's in many ways opposite some of the DDs,
Mhm.
and my biggest complaint about it is its main function is criticized by the developers, and its utility is lacking for the party.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we can move on to our next job, which I will say this every time we do a podcast together. My main job, my favorite job to play. We recently coined the term bonkatonin for this job because you go out with a big great axe and you bonk stuff and you get that kind of serotonin, but bonkatonin. Uh, we are going to discuss warrior. Where is warrior at these days? What do you
S
think?
tier.
S tier.
S plus.
So
I think Warrior is the best DD in the game.
yes, the thing that warrior is really good for is not just because it does damage, but it's one of the only jobs that significantly boosts the entire group. which is really unique among heavy DDs, and I think it's what really puts it out ahead. What do you think, Shiraj?
I think the fact that Warrior has almost the top DPS,
Mhm.
I don't know if it's the top DPS, but it's very close if it's not.
Yeah.
With Mighty Strikes, almost full-time Berserk.
Mhm.
It has Warcry for party utility and Tomahawk, which Tomahawk in like V25s is huge
Oh yeah.
because all of the V25s have 25%
Yes.
STT. So
Yes.
Tomahawk basically removes it,
Mhm.
and it's
Everybody does
insane.
more damage.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
only that, but Warrior fits into every damage type perfectly.
Yeah.
It's so
Warrior.
easy to gear up.
Yeah,
Like, it's
Warrior's the jack of
so
all trades. It has a very low barrier to entry, which is
Yeah.
essentially just enabling. And if you get a shining one and a club, you're really good to go for just about
But
everything.
then on top of that, it functions great with a Great Axe,
Mhm.
as you would love to attest to. It also functions great as a fencer without nagling. You can
Right.
use the Ikenga's axe or other one-handed axe and not weapon skill while you're nagling compatriots. Like
Yeah.
it just does everything.
Yeah, I think Warrior is the most diverse damage dealer. I think it can be used pretty much in any situation that you're going to be doing physical damage.
Yeah.
DJ pointed out in chat, and this is hella true because I do it all the time. You tank stuff on Warrior, you're completely fine. I think that's true of other DDs as well, but it's more true for Warrior. It has a lot of stuff going for it.
Yeah, because
It
Warrior
definitely
has
has more
Retaliate.
defensive options.
Yeah.
You can let an enemy kill itself with Retaliate sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Samurai's
Retaliation,
like,
super
I have
strong.
to rely on Sieg and Third Eye and kind of pseudo ninja this thing, otherwise I'm not tanking well.
Can't you also have Berserk and Defender up full time and still get like defense and attack bonus?
You can get
Yeah.
a
With
net
zero
gain by
penalty?
having both up simultaneously, or you can
Yeah.
choose to go all in one or the other. So it's
Mhm.
just so flexible.
Yeah, Warrior easily
And then you
S
have
tier.
the break weapon skills,
Mhm.
you know?
It
I'd say
contributes
if
to
you're
the
going
group. Oh, go ahead, Dex.
I'd say if you're going to make a job, Warrior should definitely be in your top 3 considerations, and Warrior should definitely be like the first thought in your mind if you're making a DD.
Yeah. So the problem with a lot of DDs as it relates to going from zero, let's say 0 to 119 endgame content as fast as you can. The problem with a lot of DDs is the Nyame barrier, but Warrior can overcome a lot of that just by simply getting a nagling, just getting some of the JSE. Sakpatas is so overpowered that if you pair that with the weapon skill damage that you get from the job specific equipment, you
And
can do a
unlike
lot of content
Nyame,
with that.
you can just wear the raw Sakpata.
Yeah,
You don't need
Yeah.
RP.
yeah, it's a really really big deal. Cool. I think we're all in agreement. Warrior S tier. We can. I know I could yap on about that for ages, but I think it's time that we move on to our
As
next
someone
job.
who isn't so much a Warrior fanboy,
Mhm.
it is truly S tier.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish the other DDs would be able to do more things.
So here's the next DD I really really like. I'm a really big fan of this job. I think it doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and that is Dragoon.
Lol Dragoon.
Lol Dragoon, the yeah, Pentathrust, what? Dragoon, I think it suffers a little bit from the same samurai problem where it's a good job if you have a prime. You guys agree with that? What do you think?
I don't agree with
Okay.
I honestly don't either. I think, unfortunately, Nagling Dragoon is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have
And Shining
Nagling
One
Dragoon. Yeah. I think Nagling Dragoon and even Shining One Dragoon is the best segment farm DPS. If you're
Okay.
going the 2 core setup, I think Dragoon is the best DPS to add to that.
Okay.
Dragoon is kind of like a warrior with less utility but dancer abilities, so it can just get TP.
Yeah. I love the versatility of Dragoon. I love the fact that it has so many jumps. It adds a unique dimension with interacting with your wyvern. The thing that I don't like about it is exactly the first thing you two said, is that it goes immediately to negling.
Yep. Unless you have the Prime or Shining
Yeah.
One, it's not, I mean, even Trishula.
Career Dragoons might argue this,
Mhm.
But I would say of the heavy DDs, Dragoon has the worst SPs.
Mm. I think it has one of the worst SPs, and I think the second SP is quite strong.
The jumping one is good, but if you compare it to the SP 1 or 2, whichever one is better of the other DDs, it's the
Right.
weakest.
Okay.
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Yeah. If you compare,
We're
well,
not talking
okay.
about Dark yet, but Soul
Yeah.
Enslavement is incredible. Plug
Yeah.
weapons track.
Yeah. Brazen Rush, not so much.
Not good. The Mighty
But-
Strikes.
Mighty
probably
Strikes.
But
best.
Mighty Strikes, yes, very, very strong.
Yeah.
So I really like Dragoon because I think it fits into it. Well, first of all, it has diverse damage types it can do, slashing and piercing mostly, but it also offers something unique to the party that Angon is very, very strong.
Yeah.
It's something that can be accomplished with other jobs, but it's not going to fall into the magic accuracy requirements that say like armor break would.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't every heavy DD have some option to do a defense down? It's just that
Yeah.
Dragoons happen to be on a JA.
Yeah, so Dragoon happens to be on a job ability. It can't get resisted by magic accuracy, as far as I know. And then you also don't have to worry, like, if you're on Warrior or some other, like, let's say a Dark Knight is trying to apply armor break, you'd have to be switching weapons, stuff like that. I think it's the most effective way to apply that particular defense down slot in sortie basement bosses.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So
My only issue with Dragoon is
Mhm.
that it's so reliant on its weapon being alive.
Yes,
Mm,
it
that's
provides
very true.
such an enormous stat stick, and then
Mhm.
when that pet dies,
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
severely gimped, and you fall behind everyone else.
Yeah.
Like when you take a Dragoon to a V25 arrow body, ideally you have the Bard, a White Mage, and I don't know, maybe a Scholar pre-buff the dragon
Mhm.
so it doesn't die.
Right.
So it's
Spirit
self-sufficient.
5 times, giving them like
Yeah.
chaos and all this stuff.
Yeah. There are a lot of ways to buff your Wyvern, which I find is really nice. It's kind of inconvenient, but I think it makes the job unique. And I kind of like that about it. Because you can do things to actively work with your Wyvern, you can do things to actively keep it alive. I think it's a really interesting job. Like meta aside, I really like Dragoon.
Dragoon might be the more complex of the heavy DDs in that
Yeah.
it's not going to be like it's not going to excel
Mhm.
right out the gate like a warrior would, but when you put a lot of work into it, it suddenly becomes competitive or better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree with that.
I think Dragoon has a higher floor to entry, but it also has a higher ceiling to a lot of people,
Yeah.
or to a lot of
definitely
jumps.
Where I'm at on it.
Mhm. So for me, I have Dragoon in A tier. You guys agree or no?
Yeah,
Cool.
I could see that. Yeah.
Especially if you get the Prime. Dragoon can be so strong.
Yeah, Prime Pole Armor is insanely strong.
And plus, I mean, if I'm playing Dragoon, I want to use a fucking polearm. I don't want to use stupid thing. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyway.
if you use the pole arm, you've got leg sweep. That's pretty strong.
Yes, it is. So for our next job, we have the one and only, the king of memes, the emo boy Dark Knight. So Dark Knight's interesting. Why don't you go ahead and start us off, Shiraj?
I think Dark Knight kind of sucks. if I'm being honest, right?
Okay.
Because it goes back to the principle of why use this job if these other jobs do it better. The main thing Dark Knight would provide is soul enslavement. Like the Prime Scythe is really good, but again, why would you use this DPS when the other jobs exist?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So, Dex, did you want to take it from there?
For a while, I played Dark Knight and enjoyed it a lot.
Mhm.
It just
With many torque levers.
many.
Yeah.
This is back when Great Sword was the only way to play Dark, and if you wore a Scythe, you were silly.
Yes.
But I think that thought process has changed over the years with the advent of different NMs, and I've seen people use Liberator on Kalunga. I've seen everything.
Yeah.
But Dark Knight, as you stated correctly, its utility is almost completely front-loaded into the fact that it can seal everyone's TP for 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, I think soul enslavement is very, very strong, and it can be really nice in the right situations. Like Aita, super nice. But as far as the game has progressed, Dark Knight has kind of been left behind in a lot of ways. The gear progression and job trade progression that a lot of the other jobs have gotten, Dark Knight has not received. So it doesn't have a way to generate TP as high as much as like Dragoon or Warrior or Samurai. Kind of falls behind. It doesn't have double attack or those store TP trades. That's kind of where I'm at. I think it's a really great job, and it is used a lot. It's going to be very effective in segments. It's going to be very effective in sortie, and it can be pretty much applied to any slashing damage Odyssey NM that I can think of.
I just wish it had more utility. Like, it's such
Yeah.
a selfish DPS.
It is. It is. I think it has some cool things going for it. Like I love the idea of dread spikes. I love the idea of being able to absorb stuff from the monster. If you made those abilities like function in a way that actually helped the party, I think would be amazing.
Dark's the only job that it can really get to cap HP, like more so than even a monk because of a magic burst drain 3.
Yeah, but in a
Yeah.
realistic scenario, when is that even
It's
useful?
not, and that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Dark Knight at its current place is still very, very usable. I think it can be applied to a lot of content. I don't think it's in a bad spot, especially when you compare it to the other categories that we were talking about, like Ninja, Thief, Pup. It's in a great spot compared to those.
Two-handed DDs all kind of excel
Yeah,
enough to be slotted into content. It's just some provide better options than others for the things you're fighting.
right.
And Dark
Yeah.
Knight tends to be the weakest in terms of what it provides.
So, given that, would you both rate Dark Knight in A or B?
B.
B.
I would probably say B.
Yeah, I think it's fair. When I was originally writing this list, I put Dragoon and Dark Knight in the same category. But after we've had the discussion, kind of talking about what each one brings, all of its unique abilities, I think Dark Knight being in B is fair. Moving on, we're going to move away from the two-handed jobs, and we're going to move on to Monk. So I personally feel like Monk is in kind of a weird spot. What do you guys think about it?
It's in a very weird spot.
Monk is amazing at what it does. Unfortunately, it doesn't do much.
Yeah.
But when you fit it into the slot where it's needed, it's pretty much the best.
That thing is rarely needed, but it does it the best. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the master of it.
So let's talk about where do we need Monk? Monk needs to be there when you apply blunt damage. So automatically that means it's going to be applied to fights where you need blunt damage. So Gigalorum and Guy, Henwin, all those fights, Monk is going to be there. Monk has some unique stuff going for it because of its ability to inhibit TP with Chi Blast, with Shijin, with all of its subtle blow. I think Monk is a really cool job, but I think the problem is not with Monk. I think the problem is with hand-to-hand weapon skills.
I think that's part of it, and I think Square Enix tends to favor slashing damage as the thing that is common
Yes.
or most common.
Yeah.
That contributes to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Monk also had the ability to equip piercing hand to hands, it would see a lot more play. Like if they added a hand to hand that did piercing and made the weapon skills do piercing.
Okay.
Or if some of its weapon skills just got changed to piercing.
You change formless strikes to all types of damage instead of breath or whatever it is. Just make it do all types of damage. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Monk also suffers from a similar thing to Samurai, is in that Monk thrives in being a single DPS. Like,
Yes.
Monk's whole thing is TP suppression, TP denial,
Yeah.
right? How can you do that if other people
Someone
are
else
DPSing? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
Very
overall,
to Amanon.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's
the Amaron
possible.
stuff.
It's just, it's not optimal, is the thing. Like, Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that video. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had. I think there's a lot of optimization to be had in that video. But that's kind of a rabbit hole we could go down another time. As far as where Monk is at right now, would you recommend it for new players?
No.
No.
Okay. Why is that? See, I find that interesting that you said no, because I think Monk is really great for being effective at mid-tier content.
I think if you're gonna do that,
Mhm.
in general play, Thief can accomplish a very similar thing.
Okay. And while providing TH.
Yes.
Okay.
Like Thief might not be as tanky via countering, via health,
Mhm.
but it can evade things. It's very similar in that
Yeah.
they thrive in solo types of content in
Mhm.
the mid tier, and they provide good enough DPS.
Okay. So with that being said, where would you two rate Monk? I would probably go C tier.
I'm debating putting it in D, but I think C is okay.
I think C is earned because it is needed for quite a few fights in Odyssey, and it can be very effective in sortie.
When
Do I think
comparing
it's the
it to the
most
other,
effective compared to the others? No, but I don't think it's 2 letter grades behind Dark Knight.
no, you're right. When comparing it to the other categories, it definitely is necessary for enough content that it
Mhm.
belongs in the metagame, but it doesn't like the D tier jobs
Yeah.
are like niche as hell.
Yeah, so for Monk, for me, this would be like my second or third job after I have, say, something that's more universally applicable, like Bard or Corsair or like a healer or something. I think Monk would be a good job to pick up as like the third option, something like
People
that.
I
having
would.
these jobs that are
Mhm.
necessary for a handful of fights in the game,
Mhm.
you need to have good players that are on those jobs.
Yeah, yeah,
I would say Monk is B tier, honestly.
really.
Really that high.
Mhm.
Not the same as Dark Knight. If like I would say like a B minus.
So you'd say that Dark Knight can be B, Monk B minus, but they're both applicable enough to not be separated by a full letter.
Yeah,
Okay.
because Monk has a lot of uses early game and
Mhm.
like mid tier content, which obviously
Yeah.
is not the point. But when
Yeah.
Monk shines, it is irreplaceable.
Yeah.
You can't say that with other jobs.
Yeah.
You know.
That's true.
I think when I first put this list together, I had Monk in B tier, and I think it's pretty fair to say B minus, right around there. Cool. So moving on, we're gonna go to. So the next two are two of my favorite jobs. They're also two of my least or my lowest ranked jobs according to this list. Black Mage is up first. Black Mage, I think, is super fun. I love playing this job. I think it's super unique. I think it has a lot more going for it than a lot of people give it credit for. But that being said, when it comes to the meta, it's not going to be used as often as I would like. Do you guys have any opinions on where Black Mage is right now?
I
Black
wish
Mage,
there was more uses.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. There's not enough Magic Burst content that funnels the players into that strategy. It's
Right.
become more of an alternative strategy.
Yeah. So Black Mage had a moment where it really, really shined. Okay, I'm gonna read this comment that we just got. It says Mounty Dan, first time chatter. Black Mage is the monk of mages. Really good where it's needed, but overall it can be passed over. I kind of think that's a really good description of it. What do you guys think about that?
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Because
So
if you
yeah,
look
go
at Black Mage's main content,
ahead.
Ongo, and obviously Mage Method Sortie, but
Mhm.
V25 Ongo, Black Mage is the king. People have
Mage Method Sortie.
setups.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Like people have setups where Black Mage is literally solo DPSing V25 Ongo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The only thing
By
a Scholar
mile.
does, yeah, the only thing Scholar does is Helix, and they can
yeah.
just do skill chains.
Well, sometimes
And
the scholar walls me, but go on.
well, that's the thing. Like because the Black Mage's nukes are so
Yeah.
much stronger than other people's,
Mhm.
they can pretty much solo DPS fights like Ongo. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, it's also
and
because of the complexity of the Magic Burst system that if people try to like steal the spotlight, then they end up
hurting everybody else.
like
Yeah.
they're nerfing everybody. It's
Yeah.
not worth it.
So
for sure.
I think the black mage is the monk of mages is a very apt description. The only thing that I think makes the difference is there's less fights where black mage can be applied than there are where blunt damage is being applied.
That's probably true.
I think
Yeah,
in
but-
current meta, yes, definitely.
So
But maging things is always an alternate strategy. It just
right.
because of the power creep of melee
hmm
and TP generation,
hmm
it's really pushed mage strategy aside in most instances where
Yeah.
it can be always used for almost anything. It just ends up
Mhm.
being the weaker of the two.
So I think Black Mage overall is not in a terrible spot, but it's not in a great one either. It's going to be
No.
absolutely necessary for Ongo. It's going to be necessary for what am I thinking of? Is it Raskovnish, the Planeswood?
The
Excuse me.
snapweed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Marmor
Snapweed. So I didn't use Black Mage for Marmor Krebs, but you can absolutely. I used a Ranger, and
That's
it
fair.
honestly performed much better. But we'll talk about Ranger in a little bit. But Black Mage has those fights where it can shine. I think for people that are getting into the like sortie level content, I think Mage strategy can actually be easier for new players to do at first because you're not
I
going to
agree.
need like R25 Nyame, stuff like that. But overall, I rated Black Mage in I think let me double check. So I had it in C tier.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Because
That's
Mage
kind of
Method,
why I wanted to put Monk in C though, because I think they
Yeah.
both are niche.
Yeah, I
in their
think
application.
I think Monk is used slightly more than Black Mage, but not by much.
I think there needs to be more content that funnels players into a black mage centric role,
hmm
like Ongo.
Yeah.
Whereas instead of just making it an option that people newer to the game will gravitate towards because it's less strict on gear requirements.
hmm
Because obviously, with how power crept the gear has become in the last 5-10 years, melee with these high level, like we're at like I-150 in terms of the stats they give.
Yeah.
It's gonna excel much faster.
Yeah.
and if you're talking about meta, people always go for the meta jobs. Black
Least
Mage is just not there. Yeah, path of least resistance.
Yeah, my problem with new players playing Black Mage, and you guys can feel free to chime in on this. My problem with people that pick up Black Mage as their first job is they tend to fall down that path that a lot of thieves go, where it's a selfish job that if you aren't performing well at it and you're forcing yourself into groups, it can really hinder a group. If you're a newer player and let's say you're forcing yourself onto Black Mage in a sortie Mage method run, if you're not performing well as a Black Mage, it's not fun to be around.
Yeah.
But overall, I love the job. I think it's really cool. The stuff that you can do with AoEs, the stuff that you can do with mana wall. I
Black
think
mage
it's
is
a fun job.
complementary to other mages with
Yeah.
the jaws.
Yeah.
It's got burn. It's the best burn applicator.
hmm And
think,
Kale made a good point. It is extremely dependent on other jobs.
Oh, for sure. It
Yeah.
depends on the skill chains because black mage is not making the skill chains for you.
Yeah, it's kind of a princess job, like our next job. Did you have anything else to add before we talk about the next one, Dex?
I would just want to say that I think black mage's detriment that
Mhm.
keeps it from seeing more utility in parties is I think more nukes should have negative effects on mobs
Mm,
just to let it like facilitate what else is in the party.
yeah,
And also I think the magic crit stat is completely forgotten and
it
Square
is.
Enix
It is.
didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
We talked about other jobs exceeding damage cap with
Mhm.
X, Y, or Z. Like
Yeah.
Black Mage should be able to magic burst over damage cap with
Yeah.
magic crit.
I would love to see the ancient magics like reworked in a way where it actually mattered. I would love to see the what is it? Is it meteor that you cast in a group?
Yes.
I'd love to see that matter. There's some cool mechanics that Black Mage has that have been completely left by the wayside that I would like to see reworked to make it a little bit more.
Comet got kind of sidelined for
Yeah,
death.
yeah,
Meteor, as you said, has been just completely underutilized because it's necessary to cast in a group.
Yeah.
The days of Black Mage burning are gone.
Yeah. Overall, really cool job, but as far as the meta goes, you're not going to be using it a ton. But again, I say C ranking because there's going to be times when you need it.
It doesn't slot in right now, but it is needed for a small amount of fights, and by needed I mean it's necessary. You
Yeah.
cannot sub it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one we're going to move on, which is famously a princess job. Arguably the most princess job is Ranger. And I want to say this real quick. We're going to be talking about Ranger mostly in the way that it's meant to be played, which is ranged damage, like actually shooting at range. There's lots of stuff to be talked about for melee stuff. There's lots of stuff to be talked. Like I like playing Kraken Club Ranger as much as anybody else, but I think for the most part that's more of like a for fun type of thing. What do you guys think about that?
Kind of like Dragoon, it's one of the best Savage Bladers.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not supposed to be doing that.
right, right. So yeah, go ahead.
I would take any other heavy DD Savage Blading over a Ranger because the Ranger actually provides 0 utility for a party. 0.
Yeah. So I think Ranger is really unique because, again, it's one of the few jobs. Only it and Corsair is going to shoot at range and do physical damage, and it can also do a fuck ton of magic damage. It's really cool. I think Hover Shot has been a really, really nice added utility. You are going to need it for certain fights. Our body, V25, I don't think anybody's ever cleared it without a Ranger that I know of.
I would have to get back to you on that.
Yeah.
I think it has been beaten without a Ranger.
Okay, I know V20 was.
Players have done it.
Yeah, I know V20 was done with like Warriors and stuff like that. Somebody said Ranger got monked by Corsair. That's kind of funny. Ranger is essentially a stronger Corsair, but without the buffs to the party.
Much stronger though. It's kind
Yes.
of like comparing Scholar to Black Mage in terms of its magic output.
Right. Oh, somebody said one JP group beat it with melee. That's really interesting. I'll have to look into that a little bit later.
I think I was referring
Yeah.
to.
So that being said, Ranger is not going to be a job that you see applied to sortie very often. It was used in the early days when they were doing Ranger with a magic strategy. I had a lot of fun with that.
In the slot of the second Scholar, I
Yeah.
liked that better.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. But that being said, Ranger is not a job that I would level in the hopes of applying it to sortie.
No.
Shiraj, do you have any thoughts about Ranger and where it's at right now?
I would not recommend
Mhm.
any new player to play Ranger. I
Yeah.
think it's arguably the hardest job in the game to play correctly
Okay,
and efficiently,
that's
to the
interesting.
point where it's probably not good for a new player. It has a few uses in terms of the current meta,
You're right.
you know, like a couple of T2 V25s,
Mhm.
Arabati V25,
Mhm.
and a couple of the Master Trials, right? It has those uses.
Yeah.
Those are not new player friendly. And if you
Okay.
cannot execute Hover Shot properly, you're basically dead weight.
Right. So I don't necessarily agree with it being the hardest job to play. We've had this discussion before. I honestly think Ranger's kind of a snooze fest to play. I love the job, don't get me wrong. But I do think it's one of the most difficult jobs to gear if you want to apply it the way that it should be to all content. I think it's very Rima dependent. And it's
definitely.
very, very expensive.
Yeah. You could, a lot of people play core as
Mhm.
their first job because of its utility, how widespread it is in every kind of content. And then they're like, okay, I made a range set, so I can make a Ranger now.
Mhm.
You're missing all the Rimas and all the extra things that you need to make that actually function at a high level.
Yeah. I think Ranger suffers from the fact that when a lot of people think about Ranger, they think about nostalgia. They think about the old 75 days and shooting a Calibri with Sidewinder to take off 50% of its HP, and it's not going to be that. Ranger is not that job anymore.
You're not that guy, pal. You're not
Yeah,
that guy.
as much as I wish I was that guy, unfortunately, we're just not. And the other thing is, if we were doing that these days, we'd be applying it to content like our body, and we'd just get immediately spanked like we used to in Dyna. You remember just laying off what was it, that big gun with the cannon bullets or whatever the fuck it was?
Culverin.
Yeah, yeah, and you just do like a couple weapon skills, and you just come over and get smacked and die. So
Ranger is king of pulling hate. And
yes,
especially because it's far away from the party, it fucks everything up.
yeah, I think Hovershot has mitigated that to a degree. Um,
Overshot is also though like
Mhm.
it's a great boon for what the job wants to do, but it adds this awful mini game to the job that is easily fuck upable.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's why I think the Ranger is one of the hardest jobs to play, because Hovershot, in my opinion, is one of the hardest focusing tasks. Yeah, like executing Hovershot efficiently,
mhm.
that's pretty hard in my opinion. Like, I don't play Ranger anymore. I haven't played it since 2017. But from watching the two Rangers in the Master Trial, I couldn't do that. Doing
Yeah.
Hovershot for an hour straight, doing
Not dropping
Hovershot in Arabadi, yeah,
You
not
gotta
not dropping a
fill
stack.
all the stacks up if you drop it
Yeah,
once.
Yeah.
that's a
And not
I
only that,
couldn't
there's
do this.
nuance of like,
Mhm.
say you're playing vanilla, which unfortunately, that's not reasonable for most players in the modern game. But
Yeah.
there's no distance modifier. There's no distance notification in the game.
Mhm.
How do you know you're moving exactly one yalm? So you're almost in all cases moving too much, and then you're wasting time, and that adds up over a 30-minute fight, hour-long fight. That adds up to a lot of missed shots.
Yeah. So I think playing it efficiently is the hard part, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Ranger is just not in a position where the damage that it is designed to do can be applied at a reasonable rate. It suffers from the same problem that Black Mage has, but to a greater extent, where it's fallen so far behind at the TP rate melees can TP at, the damage of the weapon skills melees can do. If you want Ranger to be an effective damage dealer that doesn't pull hate, and be safe at a range, then you kind of have to have tools to actually put out that damage, which I think is kind of lacking in a lot of content.
Even with max snapshot,
Mhm.
with flurry, with max rapid shot, with a Lua that allows you to use all this gear in tandem for your pre-shot and mid-shot,
Mhm.
you will never TP as fast as someone swinging two blades.
Yeah,
Ever.
yeah, it's unfortunate. Double shot is really cool. Overkill is fucking amazing. Um, it's just one of those things where it doesn't perform as well as we had a comment that said
Go ahead.
hot take cover shot ruined Ranger, and he's saying having to move side to side throughout a fight and then lose your buff if you mess it up. That doesn't have any notification that you're in proper range or distance is a janky mechanic, especially if you play vanilla. I think,
Definitely unfun.
yeah. I'll be honest. If I played vanilla, full disclosure, I don't. I don't know if anybody's picked up on that yet. I'm a dirty cheating scumbag. If I played
we couldn't tell.
vanilla, I probably wouldn't play Ranger. I don't think it would be
Ranger is
fun.
almost impossible to play
Yeah.
efficiently as a vanilla player.
Yeah. So I think that's a fair argument. I like hover shot. I think it adds a dimension to it, but I can absolutely see where that argument is coming from. So for me, based off of the fact that Ranger is absolutely necessary, except for that one Japanese group, for our body, I put Ranger on D tier.
Ranger's biggest Achilles heel is just
Mhm.
that there's zero utility that it provides.
Yeah.
I do big number from far
Right.
away.
Right. I think while Ranger is not going to offer you a lot, it's not a job that I would recommend for new players. It is going to do a little bit more for. It's going to be applied to a little bit more content than say Ninja, Pup, or Thief,
The
which are
hottest take
currently F tiers. Sorry.
The
go ahead.
hottest take I have for Ranger, as
Mhm.
someone who has played it during all aspects of this game's lifestyle or lifespan, I was a career Ranger in the 75 era. It was my first job, the 75.
Yeah.
I played before the range difference nerf,
Right.
whereas he would wear 2 Hawker's knives, stand next to the mob, and do maximum range damage.
Mhm, mhm.
next to the mob.
Yeah.
I think that nerf should have never happened. I think they should have nerfed the damage output modifiers rather than nerfing how the damage functioned.
Yeah. I
That would have
think.
kept Ranger in line with other DDs.
Yeah. What I want to do is I want a rework of bow weapon skills, and I want some flavor of AoE job ability like Warcry or something to do to the mob like Tomahawk or something, just to boost Ranger a little bit more.
To pile on to the Ranger critiques,
Mhm.
even though it's a job I deeply care for,
Yeah.
it's worse than Monk in that, sure, you can do the Savage Blade thing, but that's not, it's very much a toy. You're almost exclusively doing piercing damage.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish bows were more of a thing. I love Ranger. I've done our body on every single level as Ranger. I've cleared our body V25 multiple times on Ranger. If I have an excuse to pull it out, I would absolutely love to. But to be honest with you, there's only one excuse to pull it out, and to me, that's our body. And that's about it.
I mean, if you go back in time, there were more fights where Ranger excelled at, like Fu.
Right. Yeah.
I think some sort of JA to give Ranger utility would be great. I think more diversity of damage types would be great too. Like if they reintroduce eye level meta style guns, but made them cannons, and cannons did blunt damage, or crossbows did slashing damage, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
That would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't fundamentally solve the problem that Ranger is, air quotes, safe at a distance, so it has to shoot slower, get TP slower. Just, there's too many problems. It definitely belongs in D, maybe even F, barring the fact that it's very good for that one fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be utilized slightly more than the jobs that we currently have in F. That's why I put it in D. Again, I think it's one of those jobs where if you have enough nostalgia and you love it, you're going to make a Ranger, whether, or I mean, any of these jobs that can be said for. But I think Ranger is one of those ones where a lot of people have very fond memories of it. Are we good to move on, both of you? Any other thoughts on Ranger before you go?
Yeah, you covered it. It's a toy job. If you
Mhm.
make it, it's because you love it. It's not that you want to play it, because you're
Yeah.
almost never going to get to.
Yeah. I think Dex and I could both write really long love letters to Ranger. Okay, so our next category, we're moving on. We only have 2 jobs in this category. We have White Mage, or we have healers. So White Mage and Scholar. We're going to start with White Mage. Shiraj, you and I have discussed at length how I don't know I don't know if we use these exact words, but I think White Mage can be one of the most fun jobs in the game at certain times. What do you
Also, be less
think about
hard
White?
to play.
Exactly. What do you think about White Mage, Josh?
I think White Mage is one of the, as you said, one of the most fun jobs in the game, but I also think it's one of the worst jobs in the game.
Why is that?
Have you ever tried healing a V25 Zebioso with people who do not use remedies? People who do not use panaceas?
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say yes, but then you started talking about people that don't use remedies and panaceas, and no, I haven't done it with that, but I have done V25 healing. Yeah.
How good your party is
Yeah.
makes or breaks how easy the White Mage's job is.
Right.
Like straight up, like doing V25 and Guy as a White Mage, it should be very easy of just Cure Skin and maybe Curaga.
Yeah.
You know? But if you have to do Erase and then Cures, it's like a whole another layer of just, obnoxious. Yeah. And if you're having that kind of stress and then you get the blame for when wipes happen, it makes you not want to play the job.
Yeah. So I love White Mage. It's one of my favorite jobs to play. Personally, if I'm talking to a new player and they're asking me about jobs that they should pick up, I think White Mage is the best job for a new player to pick up, not only because it can function easily, um, but because it gives them a better understanding of what's happening in the party. There's no DD that appreciates a white mage more than the DD that's actually been a white mage. And I think that's an important perspective to have, especially for new players. So we got a question from Mounty Dan. He says, out of 10, how mission critical is the Yag Rush? Well, I can tell you, Mounty Dan, from personal experience. So Shiraj and I were talking about party members using remedies and panaceas. If your party is good, especially in V25 content, because your party is going to be expected to do that, you don't use a Yag Rush in those fights. If you're utilizing the Yag Rush in the hardest content, which are besides Master Trials, which is going to be the V25s, your party is fucking up. It is really nice for sortie, but
Eight bosses, yeah.
yeah. Do you want to talk about that, Shiraj?
Yag Rush is like the noob crutch, and I don't mean the white mage is the noob. It's the crutch for other noobs.
Yeah, Yag Rush is basically the savior of bad DDs.
So I don't have a Yag Rush on my alt that is my main white mage for content. I have one on Myth. It's really nice because I'm lazy, but you don't absolutely need it by any means.
It makes certain things easier for you as the white mage. It is not critical.
Yeah.
I would not put it as critical.
The only fight I've ever thought I needed a Yag Rush was 2016, 2017 Tumult Curator. I had to heal that without a Yag Rush. And that was one of the hardest and worst things I've ever had to do.
Yeah. As a critique to the pickup group scene, especially on Azura, having a requirement for a Yag Rush for content like Odyssey and Sortie is absurd.
Pretty dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think white mage can excel.
15 Yag Rush for Ambuscade.
Yeah.
I think people that shout that they require a Yag Rush white mage are bad players.
I agree.
Yes.
They need that crutch in their back pocket because they can't have the personal responsibility to use medicine.
Yeah. As far as white mage performs in the meta, there's no job that heals better than it. It does the active healing and erasing debuffs better than any other job. You guys have anything that you want to add to that specifically?
You will know, like, white mage is one of the few jobs in the game that is so easy to tell the difference between a good one and a bad one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also the most botted job in the game.
It's very true.
White mage has the unfortunate responsibility of having the access to every type of removal spell in the game, and that just puts so much on its plate that it has an enormous task of like juggling a hierarchy of needs in their head as to what needs to be removed at what point and what has priority over another thing. So it's a very difficult job to master, one of the highest ceiling.
I agree.
But it's such an important role for so many fights in the game that it's definitely, like, I would say at least an A tier job.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I put it on S tier because, like I said, I think it does healing best. But to be fair, it's not going to be applied to as much content. So if we frame it in that form of discussion, white mage isn't going to be So white mage is going to be important in fights like Kalunga and Guy, Zevioso. It's going to be important for melee method sortie.
I would say you don't even need Kalunga. There's a lot of fights that Paladin can circumvent the white mage's role because the curing is not as critical to success.
Yeah, it's very true.
So because of that, the white mage ends up being used in less fights because you can circumvent it and have more DDs fill that spot or more support fill that spot.
Yeah.
Which is why I personally don't put it in S.
Okay.
I think it's the premier healer. And it excels at being the best healer for fights where you're taking so much that other jobs can't cut it. But a lot of content you can get by with off healers.
Right. What do you think about, where would you rank white mage, Shiraj?
I would probably say around A tier as well.
Yeah. I think me putting it in S when I did the initial rankings was probably a little too narrow of a scope that I was looking at it through. I think I was looking at it because I love White Mage. I think it's one of the most versatile jobs. My favorite thing to do on White Mage is tank stuff.
Yeah,
A good White Mage can tank Guy V25 for a long time. Um, but that being said, it's not going to be universally applicable like a bard or corsair would. I almost said barsair, but you know what I mean.
well, for most like V25s, White Mage inadvertently ends up being the tank for both the pets.
Yeah, it's
And
a
that's not to say
super
like
strong job.
it's like a paladin can tank those too, but there's so many fights where the paladin holding those pets
Yeah,
doesn't steer the party well enough, and then guess what?
yeah.
Use that White Mage. It's necessary,
So I think,
especially if debuffs need to be removed.
yeah, I think in that frame, I'd probably still say A plus, just because it does something unique that some of the jobs, while they can do the same thing on a smaller scale, they're not going to be able to keep up with it.
For sure.
That's fair.
Cool. You guys ready to move on to the next one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Cool. So next is me and Shiraj are going to fight over this about who loves this job more. Next is Scholar, and I put it in the healer section because I think it is used more often as a healer. But at this point, I think that we can even open it up to saying that it's even more than a healer. But we can kind of get into that as we discuss it more. Shiraj, you love Scholar. You do lots of solo stuff on Scholar. What are your initial thoughts?
Honestly, even though I love the job, I don't like seeing other people play the job. Because
I fully understand. We've had this conversation before. Yeah.
Scholar has like
Yeah.
the kind of because whenever scholars are like applicable, right?
Mhm.
Magic burst setups mainly.
Yeah.
Scholar has such a large role in the success of that. If you have a
Yeah.
bad scholar, you automatically lose.
So
Uh,
I think that Scholar is one of the most heavily automated jobs in the game.
100%.
And I think that's what makes it bad.
Right behind Bard.
Yeah, well, okay. So let's rephrase that. I think Scholar is the most heavily automated jobs that people are actively playing, and that's the only job that they're playing. Does that make more sense? Because I mean, people automate Bard, but what pisses me off about Scholar, and we kind of discussed this because I made my Scholar guides, and I almost put this in there too. Please don't automate your fucking skill chains. Just please don't. What do you think about automating skill chains? I mean, we've talked about this. I definitely have a harder point of view than you do, Shiraj. I think from our conversations, but a lot of people will automate skill chains specifically in endgame content for Scholar.
You do that, you don't learn anything, and
Yeah.
then you lack the ability to change on the fly to something that's necessary when you.
That's what I don't like about it, is it takes out the flexibility and the diversity of the job.
I see. I agree to an extent, but I think it depends on the scholar.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're playing with like a new to mid tier scholar,
Mm-hmm.
automating skill chains is a no go. Because if something goes wrong, they will not know why it went wrong.
Right.
If you're playing with an experienced scholar and they're doing like an automated script for their skill chain
Mm-hmm.
because they're trying to be lazy,
Yeah.
that's
And
more understandable and forgiving than not knowing.
but I've seen experienced scholars also have the same problem because they never learned
Yeah.
how to do it. They've been playing scholar for years, but then we get to Ongo and they're wondering why the skill chain's not being done correctly when they're casting Fire 4. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck,
Yeah,
man?
I fully understand. See, I think it's almost bound to happen
Mhm.
where you fuck up a skill chain, right?
Yeah.
If you're playing it legit,
Mhm.
manual, or like automated, you know?
Yeah.
But I think if you're automating the skill chains, it's more prone to fucking up
Mhm.
because all of these like scripts and like automations, they're mostly done on a timed interval, right?
Yeah.
And you cannot trust the in-game lag. to like
Right.
not fuck up.
Right. So let's axe the automation talk. That's more of like a personal bone that I have to pick with some of the
Yeah,
endgame
that's
community.
understandable.
It's
Would you agree with
probably
me? Would you agree with me that Scholar is probably among the top 3 most complicated jobs?
yeah, I was gonna bring that up next actually. That I think
I would.
Scholar is probably one of, if not the most difficult job to really comprehend and play well. You wanna talk about that, Shiraj?
I think playing it very efficiently
Mhm.
and like well at a high level, I think is probably one of the top 3 hardest jobs to do.
Yeah,
Um, I haven't seen many people do it, is the thing.
right.
Like, it's so easy to make a mistake, and if you make a mistake, chances are you've just caused a wipe.
Yeah.
Well, it has that internal ammo system in its stratagems, and it has access to so many different ways to enhance your spells. It has
Mhm.
access to aspects like a red mage, but to a higher degree. You
Yeah.
can play black mage or a white mage.
Yeah. If you are doing the hardest content, let's say you're trying to do Ongo V25 in one key item, and you fat finger 2 stratagems, that could be the end of the run.
The whole run.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I know that from experience because I did that a couple days ago,
Yes.
like about a week ago.
Yeah. That's one of the few fights where like I'd consider myself very close to being a career scholar. I really love the job. I've done hundreds of mage sortie runs on scholar. It's one of my favorite jobs to play. That's one of the few fights where I truly feel uncomfortable on, but also it's one of the things where you just need a little bit of practice. So
Yes.
it's a job that requires a lot of practice. So that being said, what do you think about scholar for new players?
Terrible idea.
Really?
I think it's very difficult,
Mhm.
but I think it's rewarding for a player to learn Scholar.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
Scholar was
Because
actually the very first mage job that I picked up at 75 era when it came out. And I'm really glad that it was the first mage job that I picked up.
like what you were saying with white mage, where
Mhm.
you learn to play white mage, and then when you play DD, you understand what they're trying to do, and you
Mhm.
appreciate it, and you can work better for the whole party.
Yeah.
Scholar will give you that, but also Scholar provides not just heals, it's probably the second best healer in the game. Not just nukes, probably the second best nuker in the game, but it's also a support job.
Yeah.
So it's the best of all mage worlds, all bundled into one, but with a lot of complexity into what you do, and it teaches you like to juggle a lot of things, but
Mhm.
also to fill these types of roles. So I think it's a great job to pick up. Maybe not your first or second job, but it's something that will really be rewarding for you to become a better player and understand the nuances of each type of role each
Yeah.
job provides.
So how I was saying that I think DDs should always play white mage before they start full timing DDs. I think black mages should play scholar before
That's
they.
accurate.
What's that?
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah. I think it's a fucking fantastic job. I love even just healing on it, just going to segments on it. I think it's one of the most diverse jobs in the game. But how often is it going to be applied in the current meta? Do you guys think?
Not very often. Like, there's a reason I solo a lot of stuff on
Mhm.
Scholar.
Yeah.
Trying to take Scholar into party content.
Hmm.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. I think the
I feel like Scholar is
premier.
the
Yeah.
king of Scholar is the king of like the B team.
Okay.
Literally.
I think that's a really good description. It's really good for 3 time runs for like if you're trying to get RP in Odyssey. But I think the one thing that we haven't mentioned so far is Scholar is the king of healing segments.
Yes.
That's true.
I will take that over any other healer. I would rather that
Mhm.
over a red mage, a white mage.
Yeah, regen allows a level of diversity in segment runs that you can't really do with any other job. It allows DDs to go off on their own. You don't have to work as hard because you have just this really strong regen going on. It's a really unique job for segments, and it's definitely going to be needed for stuff like if you're doing a mage method sortie run, you can't do it without a scholar.
Yeah,
If
you
you,
need that
yeah.
color to provide the skill chains for the
Mhm.
black mage.
If you're doing let's see, the Ongo, you're not going to be doing it without a scholar. If you're doing Raskovnish, you're not going to be doing it without a scholar. Maybe you could do a T2 without a scholar, but for the most part, they're going to be heavily utilized.
One thing that's not we haven't talked about is the difference between White Mage and Scholar and why White Mage is used more. Like White Mage has a completely different healing style than
Yes.
Scholar.
Yes.
Like White Mage is very proactive,
So
and
Scholar is
Scholar is
harder
very
to heal,
reactive.
right?
Yeah.
Would you agree that Scholar is a
doesn't provide
harder
the
job to
same
heal?
and Scholar
Yeah.
doesn't provide the same degree of AoE heal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Scholar doesn't have as good of bar spells. You know, Scholar doesn't have any like native bar
That too.
spells.
So it can't mitigate the damage either,
Yeah.
other
And
than AoE Stone Skin.
yeah, so like Scholar has to react to any damage, whereas White Mage can proactively prevent it with Cure Skin.
Absolutely.
And that's what separates the shit White Mages from the God tier White Mages is the proactive Cure Skins.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Scholar, where would you rate that? I put Scholar in A tier.
Here.
What did you say, Dex?
I said A tier.
A tier? Okay. What do you
I
think?
want to
Shit.
put Scholar in S, but Scholar isn't utilized in like enough specific endgame fights in the
Yeah.
current metagame.
I agree.
I think
I was gonna
Scholar
say
is
B.
a better overall
Yeah.
job. You're crazy.
See, I can see where you're coming from, Shiraj. I think Scholar is
The job's
unique
not
enough.
used enough.
I think
it's not used enough.
I think it's unique enough that it boosts it up quite a bit. And I think there are like, I mean, you can't say Odyssey segments are not an integral part of the meta because you
Same
need that
for
to do all of the difficult content.
Same for
I
main strat
understand.
sortie. It's most people's stepping stone into the content,
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah, but
critical to that content.
yeah, I agree. But I just don't think it's used enough because the meta is a melee focused style.
That's
you
very
know?
true. Yeah. So
Square Enix recently put out a video in which they showed that Wings of War is being completed with a Scholar.
Yeah, but they also probably have GM mode on not dying.
Yeah, no, it's
jeez.
sarcasm.
Yeah. Yikes. Okay. So
I wish Scholar was used more. That's
yeah,
all.
I agree. I think I wish it was used more in the way that it can be utilized because it's such a diverse job. We've talked about this on length already.
Yeah, it's so strong.
We haven't talked about this yet, but I
Mhm.
think the biggest issue for Scholar's success in the metagame is
Yeah.
the lack of alliance content.
True.
It does really do good in alliance content, doesn't it? Because you can accession other parties. You can do a lot of unique stuff. Yeah, that's a really good point.
The fact
So
that endgame has been reduced to static style 6-man party content
Mhm.
has put Scholar out of things that it normally would be fine in.
it's very true. I think Scholar does a great job. I'm gonna leave it in A.
That's where I'm more comfortable leaving it. I understand
and
your criticism,
yeah, and we can fight about it, Shiraj. I don't mind.
Well, we can fight somewhere else.
All right, we'll fight about it in private. Anyway, let's move on. We're gonna move on to tanks. This is our last category. So interesting thing. I put them both in the same tier, but I think once we have a discussion about it, I think I might end up changing that. So first up is my very first 75 job. Still one of my main jobs again. I think Warrior, Paladin, and Scholar are the three jobs that I play the most. We're going to discuss Paladin. What are your guys' thoughts on where Paladin is currently?
I'll let Dex go first.
Do we want to talk about both jobs simultaneously? Kind of to each other?
I think we should discuss them individually and then talk about how they kind of play off of each other.
Okay. I feel like Paladin. It's so hard to talk about one without talking about the other.
If you want to bring up the other one, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, they both kind of like they fill the same role, and each excels at different things in that role.
Right.
Paladin's biggest difference being that it can heal.
Mm-hmm.
I think in most modern endgame stuff, Paladin typically is more approachable and more desirable because A, it has less things to juggle, and B, it heals. And being able to provide that off heal allows it to circumvent bringing a white mage to like weaker content, and it just keeps the party alive in things where your party's less balanced or less focused on a specific goal.
Right. Shiraj, you're famous for being the rune fencer. Tell me how much you love Paladin.
See, this is going to be quite a shock. In terms of like the meta,
Yeah.
I think Paladin's in a decent spot. I think Paladin could use some tweaks in terms of enmity gain,
Okay.
but that's a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of the general public, Paladin's in a fine spot.
Yeah.
It cures, and it's easy to play. Paladin has one of the lowest room for errors out of any of the important jobs, healers and tanks, you know? It's the easiest to play, which ease of use is what you want.
Right.
What? Yeah,
So-
ease of use is what you want.
Yeah.
Especially with the backup cures, it's nice.
Mhm.
Do I think it's optimal? No, I do not.
Why don't you think it's optimal?
Because out of personal like experience of playing both, Paladin's just it's good, right? Paladin's good, but it doesn't do much better than Rune Fencer. Like, oh, you want to take physical damage? You talk about block. People talk about block quite often. What content are you blocking? What, sortie? You got Gartel and the Shan. You've got seg farms. Everything's mass pulled around you. You're barely blocking.
Yeah. Right.
You've got Dynamis. Everything's mass pulled around you. You're barely blocking. If you can block, cool.
Yeah, I would say to that point, Paladin's success, other than being a weird backup healer, is contingent on its success blocking. Like if the content that you're fighting, all of its TP moves don't get blocked, then you're just not gonna bring a Paladin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I think Paladin's fine the way it is. I don't think it needs the only change I think Paladin needs is it needs more cumulative enmity options on its it needs more cumulative enmity on its job abilities.
Yeah.
Because
Do you think
the
they
job
could
ability,
rework enmity retention stat?
I think enmity retention needs reworked. Yes.
It's such a bad stat. They
Enmity
throw it on
retention.
everything in Paladin.
Yeah, enmity retention is a terrible stat.
Interesting.
Terrible.
So I really like Paladin. It's really the only tank that I play. I have a Rune Fencer, but I have no idea how to play it. My favorite part about Paladin is that at this point in the game, I'm essentially a white mage that takes even more damage.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree with that assessment or no?
You think the Paladin takes more damage than the white mage?
No, it takes less damage. Well, it can. Let me rephrase that. It can take bigger damage, meaning that it doesn't take as much damage from heavier hitting stuff.
Yeah. Then I would agree with that assessment in terms of its popular use currently.
Yeah.
Like especially for things like 9-bus sortie or tanking pets in certain B25 fights.
Right. I think Paladin is in a great spot. I love that they went in the direction of making it more of a healer type tank with Majesty. That single update really made Paladin for me.
Majesty saved Paladin.
Yes.
Put it that way.
Yes. I absolutely agree. As far as where Paladin is in meta content, we have it used a lot for segments. It's the preferred tank for segments. Is that a fair assessment?
For the general public, I would
Yes. For a pickup group.
I think that's kind of ignorant.
Okay. Why do you think it's ignorant?
I think Rune Fencer can take less damage on pulls if they're doing it right.
Well, that's
I
the
agree.
thing. That's not the general public.
Yeah.
Like, for pugs, people like Paladin because of the cures. Is it optimal? Is it
Yes.
better? No, it's not.
I think
not
good
in
groups
this
shouldn't
case.
be needing those cures and can rely solely on the regen dollar, which is kind of why
I agree. Good groups should not need them.
Mm-hmm. As someone who's not good, I rely heavily on using
I feel
cures
like
as
all
a
these
crush.
are like subtle fights against
Yeah.
Myth.
No, and that's perfect. It's because I use Paladin all the time. Paladin was my very first level 75 job. I'll never not play Paladin. But everything that you said, I absolutely agree with. I think Rune Fencer can take less damage. I think Rune Fencer is overall a more subtle job than Paladin is, but I think Paladin offers a lot of things that Rune Fencer doesn't, and that's primarily offering two very different things for the group. So I think we should rank Paladin. I think we should discuss Rune Fencer, and then I think we should kind of loop back to the two different things that they offer the group.
I would put Paladin in A tier.
You'd put Paladin in A tier. Okay. So given that Paladin is going to be used for Ammonon, it's going to be used for Kalunga, whether you're using it to tank Kalunga or using it to tank the ads, you're going to be using it.
Most people tend to prefer a tanking Kalunga.
Yeah, it's the dumb, silly, easy way to do it. That's how I did it, and that's how I got my clear. It's simple and easy, just plug and play. But let's see what other stuff. A lot of people are going to be using it for segments. I'd say Paladin overall is in a really great spot. I think A tier is fair. I put it on my initial assessment as S tier, but I think now that we've discussed it, I'd go A tier. What do you think, Shiraj?
I think it's fine.
Yeah. Cool. So let's move on. This is our last job, unless I missed something. I think this is our last job. Rune Fencer. What's that, Dex?
I said it's a shame you didn't forget.
Oh yeah. Rune Fencer. Shiraj, I know you don't know much about Rune Fencer, Dex. Why don't you kick us off with Rune Fencer?
Yeah, like there's some guy that wrote a really good guide on Rune Fencer.
It's okay.
I think do some homework.
Mm-hmm. See, my problem with that guy in particular is he's always backseat driving when I'm doing a really bad job playing Rune Fencer.
Sounds like a you problem.
So,
Playing Rune Fencer right now. I mean,
so what do you like about Rune Fencer that Paladin doesn't offer?
I think Rune Fencer can mitigate more types of damage and hold hate a lot better. It has a lot more buttons to generate enmity.
Yeah.
And Rune Fencer just feels like it slots into more parties. It can support Mage, which Paladin cannot do. Like Rake
Right.
and Gambit are essential to a lot of Mage comp.
Okay. Is Rune Fencer one of the most busy jobs in the game?
I would say it's probably.
It can, yeah.
I think if you're playing Rune Fencer efficiently, it has a very busy startup.
Okay.
You can get to like a comfortable point in Enmity where you're reacting more to what's happening.
Yeah.
But on pull, you need to do a lot of things to get to a comfortable point.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I like to play Rune Fencer, is I like to spike my enmity so high at the start to the point where I'm comfortable and I know that I'm close to capping hate, if not capped hate.
Right.
So I don't have to cast many spells anymore. I can just chill, relax, and
That's
I
really
take less
important
damage.
because you have these set of JAs that each mitigate a type of damage, and a lot of new Rune Fencers will just throw those out to spike your enmity. But you want to
Right.
have them in your back pocket for scenarios where you need them. You don't want to just waste them.
Yeah, so there's a time and a place as to when to use them,
Yeah.
and I think one of the reasons Rune Fencer's not used as much in the meta game is because of the skill gap in it.
Okay.
There is, like, you can easily tell when someone is new to Rune Fencer
Yeah.
and not experienced.
I can say from personal experience, even recently, going from Paladin to Rune Fencer, which is a job I'm not comfortable on, I felt like my head was dipping below water constantly. There's a lot to learn about the job. I think it's a little bit more complex. I don't think it's going to be as new player friendly, but I think it offers so much more than Paladin does in a different area because it can boost damage in a way that Paladin doesn't offer.
Yeah.
So, as far as where Rune Fencer is in the meta, where would you put it? And we're talking in reference of the general public pickup group of Azuras. How often are you going to be using Rune Fencer?
So for these last 4 jobs, I would as a standalone job, I would put
Mhm.
Scholar in S, and I would put Rune Fencer in S.
Okay.
But for general play
Right.
and for where they fall into the metagame,
Mhm.
whether it's right or wrong, how these players perceive these jobs and how they utilize them,
Yeah.
it falls into A tier.
Okay.
Oh, that's more generous than I was.
Really?
Put it lower.
Where were you gonna put Rune Fencer, Shiraj?
I was gonna put Rune Fencer in B.
Really?
Yeah.
So
because-
interesting. You were gonna put both Paladin and Rune Fencer in B. Is that right?
No, I was gonna put Paladin in A because
Oh.
Paladin is the easier job to play.
Sure.
That's a given, right? Paladin appeals to the broader public.
Mhm.
The job is not better than Rune Fencer at most things, but
Right.
it's easier to play, and people will take the path of least resistance.
Right.
And for the general public, the meta, it's Paladin. Look at Sortie. I've had more success doing 9-boss Sortie runs on Rune Fencer than Paladin.
Mhm.
People talk about Paladin's DPS. It's possible to get over 500k on Rune Fencer and still
Yeah.
9-boss hit 90k plus Galley.
Okay.
Right.
So
Paladin is struggling to hit 400k.
yeah. Would you say that it's fair that similar like how we were talking about Dragoon having a higher floor to entry but a higher ceiling, Rune Fencer is kind of in the same area when compared to Paladin?
Yeah, I would say Rune Fencer is probably one of the hardest jobs to play correctly.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people do not prefer it, because it has very little room for error in some fights. Look, the
Okay.
perfect example of that is V25 Kalunga. So many people prefer Paladin to tank the boss.
Yes.
How many times do you see a Rune Fencer get flattened to Searing Serration?
And I gotta say, even among some of the best players that I know, that can be a real struggle point. It's not common to find a Rune Fencer in Azura, especially in the endgame pug community, that's going to be able to tank that effectively.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, that's why Rune Fencer is not going to be used as much, even though it actually does a better job.
Yeah. So overall, Rune Fencer and B. Go ahead, Shirish. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say, yeah, Rune Fencer's B, definitely.
Okay.
Especially for the general public.
Interesting. I think Rune Fencer offers a level of benefit to the group that Paladin doesn't, but I think it's completely different things that we're offering. So if we're comparing the two of them, I think Paladin is the support healer, and I think Rune Fencer is the support damage dealer. Would you guys agree with that?
Not anymore.
Okay. Why so?
Rune Fencer hasn't really been a damage dealer or hybrid tank in the last 4 years.
Maybe
The main
more.
the only place I really hybrid DPS is Seg Farms.
So what I meant by that is it can increase the group's damage in ways Paladin can't. Primarily for like mage stuff.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it provides more offensive benefits than Paladin does.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Cool. You guys have anything to add for Rune Fencer?
No.
Best job in the game.
Best job in the game.
I think it's an S tier job, and people just need to get better at the game.
Yeah,
That's how I feel, Dex,
I think it's
but-
a hard job to play. Like honestly, I'm intrigued by Rune Fencer. The biggest thing that's keeping me from playing Rune Fencer right now is the Phalanx set, which I'm trying to augment during this Dark Matter campaign. Mostly because I'm too lazy to farm Teon, and I don't want to use Teon on Rune Fencer.
From a brain dead perspective, I would say Paladin slots better into melee groups because it has the ability to heal people.
Yeah.
And most melees are brain dead, and
Yes.
they don't, and they're just not really experienced, so
Yes.
they need that support. And Rune Fencer slots into mage because of its rake and gambit and abilities that supplement that.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's an absolutely fair assessment. Paladin generally plugs and plays with melee. Rune Fencer generally goes with mage people.
Yeah. But
most
like,
people
yeah.
prefer to play melee, so they just don't even think about Rune Fencer. It's more complicated for them.
Yeah.
But my personal opinion is that Paladin is nowhere near as good of a tank as Rune Fencer. It's just the general public, Paladin's better.
Sure. Okay. I think that is our last job. So what I want to do now is we're gonna circle back to the conversation where versatility in endgame is really the key. And if we're talking about the meta, I think versatility is the actual meta. I think Odyssey has kind of forced a new style of gameplay where if you are looking to get into endgame, you have to have multiple jobs.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you were to, let's say, pick a couple jobs, like a job combination of, let's say, 3 jobs for new players, what do you guys think would be some of the most beneficial ones?
Corsair.
Corsair. Okay.
Corsair, definitely.
Hmm.
I would I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I would say White Mage.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Paladin, Scholar, or White Mage in one like bundle. Pick one of them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I said
I
earlier,
would.
and I'll say it again. I think everyone should play White Mage at some point. Whether or not you like it and stick with it, I don't care. I think you should all experience what it's like to be a pure backline healer that has to deal with people complaining.
If you wipe, it's the White Mage's fault. At least you.
Well, that's true. That's very true. I think in my Paladin video, I actually said if you die, just blame the White Mage. But
Yeah.
but I still think that it's a valuable lesson for new players, especially in a game like Final Fantasy XI where you're
So you just
going
want
to be
them to get-
changing jobs. You want
I
him to
said
get what? Okay.
you want the White Mage to get blamed.
Yes, I want the White Mage to get blamed 100% of the
No,
time.
be sarcastic, obviously.
What other jobs do you guys recommend as a new player starting out?
Warrior is the
Yeah,
third
Warrior.
one.
Warrior.
Yeah. I'm gonna go kind of a different route. I think Geo is an excellent job for new players.
I would put that like fourth on my list.
Okay.
I think like to be a well-rounded player and
Mhm.
to understand the game and its complexities,
Yeah.
you should have a support role. You should have a heal or tank role.
Mhm.
Paladin kind of both,
Yeah.
but heal or tank. And then you should have a damage dealer. But
Okay.
then after that, Geo is both a support and a mage. So it gives you that like hidden layer of the game that a lot of players aren't prone to seeking out.
Right.
Like mage strategy is always the B strategy in the current iteration of the game. It used to be the premier way to play like in 2015.
Okay.
But I think Geo is good enough without its premier Rima weapon,
Mhm.
but it's gimped by it to a certain degree where people are not going to be as likely to pick you up.
It's very
Corsair,
true.
on the other hand, as a support, can get the Regal Neck or the Ring and be much more in line with someone who has the max roll effective buff from the Rostam
Yeah.
and kind of just work their way towards becoming a better damage dealer
Okay.
while being a support naturally.
Hmm. So we've picked jobs from every category: tank, healer, DD, and supports. The only category we didn't choose from was a hybrid support.
Those are bad. Most of them were low on the list.
It's very true. We did put all of them relatively low on the list.
Those are your more fun jobs, mostly.
If you guys were to pick one of those, again, the list is Dancer, Blue Mage, Summoner, Beastmaster, Ninja, Pup, and Thief.
I have a follow-up
Which,
question.
yeah, what's up?
Is this as a new player or is this as a like get your fundies?
This is as a newer player.
Either Blue Mage or Thief.
Okay, I can agree with that assessment. What do you think, Shiraj?
The bias within me wants to say Beastmaster, but I know for a fact that it's not the right answer.
Yeah. I think Beastmaster is a lot more complicated than many people.
Yeah.
are
I'll have to say
accept.
Thief.
Thief.
I think
Okay.
is good enough soloing at weaker content,
Mhm.
just naturally from its evasion, and you can kind of play like a DD that isn't as strong at DD but is more defensive or more able to like just hold things,
Yeah.
and you can work your way towards other jobs by using your treasure hunter to get money.
Mhm.
Blue Mage, on the other hand, is much more complicated of a job and requires a lot more like love to learn all the nuances of it. But
Right.
Blue Mage is like a Red Mage's younger brother.
Mhm.
It can solo a lot of things, and you can kind of utilize the debuffs and buffs to make your way into better content.
Yeah, I think
And it can cleave, which
from
no other does really well.
from a new player perspective, strictly coming up from 1 to 99 out of the hybrid support DDs, I think Blue Mage is unique in that it will force you to see a lot of the game world that you won't see with a lot of other jobs.
Yeah.
I think it offers, if you're looking for the Vanadil experience, I think Blue Mage is the one to pick out of those. But that's kind
Learning
of,
skills alone
yeah.
will make you go to shitty places.
Yes, and it's really interesting because there's so much of the world. This is a whole other episode that we can do. There's so much of the world that you don't see just zooming from 1 to 99 and
If you
going
want
to
to touch
endgame.
on that topic, I mean, last summer I leveled fishing from 0 to 110, and that was a whole like nostalgia trip of go to this corner.
I think we should have an entire podcast about that. So we'll kind of table that. I do want to have that conversation, but maybe not during this episode.
Yeah, of course.
So overall, like finishing thoughts, what I want to put out is that compositions vary heavily depending on what type of end game that you're doing. Final Fantasy
Absolutely.
XI, especially in the current era with Odyssey, you have to have flexibility. You have to have multiple types of jobs. If you're going into this game thinking that you want to do end game and you only have one job to offer, you're gonna run into trouble.
I would say most jobs in this game are far more complex than meet the eye.
Yes.
There's just a level of nuance that you need to kind of do your homework and learn what's going on the back end so that you understand how to prepare your front end.
Yeah, kind of on a side note, do you guys think that job versatility is more important now than it has been in the past?
Yes.
Yeah, because of Odyssey.
Okay. For people that are listening to this, like looking to get into endgame, just like as a very very brief overview, Odyssey, you're required to only bring in one of each type of job, so you can't have duplicates. And if you're doing multiple key items, you cannot reuse jobs. So, worst case scenario, you have to bring 18 different jobs across 6 people for 3 key items.
No sub jobs.
No sub jobs. It really forces you to learn the jobs and have a diverse thing. As far as the major setups, I think there's 3 that are majorly used right now. I think the mage method can be arguably very valid for sortie. I think it's necessary for Odyssey. I think melee is probably the most popular, and then I think the Ammonon setup is kind of its own thing. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's kind of fair.
Yeah.
Yep, that sounds good.
So for general play, mage setup is going to be like black mage, scholar, the general skill chain and nuke stuff. The melee is probably the most brain dead strat. Do you guys agree with that?
For Savage Blade.
Yeah.
Savage Blade is hard, bro. What do you mean?
And then Ammonon dives into kind of more of a complex thing that's do you think Ammonon is more niche, or do you think it's like generally something that people should strive towards these days?
I think it's very niche, but I think people should strive towards it because it allows them to learn how to like utilize jobs in different ways.
Right.
Also, coordination. Like, coordination is a very underused skill in this game.
Yeah. It definitely requires a lot of communication.
With that Ammonon team comp, if people aren't doing their piece of the puzzle in the right sequence, like the whole thing falls apart.
So when we discuss the meta in general, one thing that we haven't really talked about is communicating with your party members. And that's one thing that pugs generally suffer for because they're not comfortable communicating with people. They're not in a position where it's easily done, like whether they're on voice chat or whatever. What do you guys generally think about that?
Do your best and communicate your understanding level and an ability and an interest to learn when necessary.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to be rude and blunt?
Yes.
Yeah, do it.
People need to man up and just be willing to be wrong and ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too many people are scared of asking questions, so when they join pugs, they don't know what they're doing because they're too scared to ask questions because they don't want to be told, why don't you know what to do?
Yes. And I think there's something to be said about the pug scene, again, specifically on Azura, that kind of discourages newer players to play.
Yeah.
So I think communication, being willing to say, "Hey, I'm not super familiar with this. Can you explain it to me?" is okay. I took it to your break between Odyssey V25's coming out and Sortie, and when I came back, I had the gear, but I had no fucking clue what I was doing in Sortie. So there were a lot of embarrassing moments for me as a quote unquote veteran player, but really I had no idea what the content was. So
You are
that's
often embarrassing.
yeah, no, I am. I like, to be completely honest, I would put myself objectively as a middle class endgame player. And I'm fine with
I'm
that.
just I'm just a shit poster who dies.
Poster who dies. Yes, you heard it here first, folks. Shiraj, #1 shit poster of Azura.
I think I spent half today dead on the floor. Like, bruh.
All right. Do you guys have
Take that.
anything? Yeah, go ahead,
Post.
Dex.
I'm just shit.
You guys have anything you want to add before we wrap this up?
I'm good.
I think most jobs in the game, like the balance of the game, is a lot better
Mhm.
than seen based on our discussion. Like,
Yeah.
I think the jobs that are air quotes low tier, bad, they're not far off. They just lack
Yes.
utility or the ability to have access to certain damage types.
Mhm.
They're not far off, and things can be accomplished with these jobs
Mhm.
that you shouldn't allow people to dissuade you from trying.
Yeah. If this is a game objectively, that means we're here to have fun. So don't take anything that we're saying seriously. This is a discussion that's entirely geared to objectively, as much as we can, evaluate where the jobs are at a basic level of the public view. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's all I have,
I think
guys.
my final thing on the jobs is
Mhm.
Square Enix can easily bring any of these jobs up to a certain level out
Yes.
of nowhere. They've done
Yes.
it in the past. So it's
My,
not,
Mhm.
don't like undersell jobs and like give your time to work on jobs that might not be meta
Yeah.
currently, because I'm sure they're on people's radar, especially after that huge what do you call it, player census, whatever they did.
Oh yeah. My favorite thing about this episode that we're doing right now is we can have the exact same topic a year from now and it could be a completely different conversation.
I don't expect it to be very different, but I would
Right.
like to see it change.
Yeah. Will it be very different? Probably not, but it could be. And I'm eager to find out what things are going to change when Limbus and the rest of that content that they've been talking about comes out.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Cool. So thanks, guys. Thank you, Shiraj and Dex, for hanging out and just bullshitting with me for almost 3 hours. Holy shit. I apologize, Shiraj, for keeping you up this late, but I think we are good to call it there.
It's only 3 in the morning. We're good.
Go sit down, Joe Rogan, idiot.
Oh, Jesus. All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.